Okay, good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. It is 7:34. We'll take roll call.
Member Gallinson?
Here.
Member Gilmore? Member Fracchetti?
Here.
Member Kohler? Member Gross?
Here.
Member Silvershack?
Here.
And President Katzmal.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'm Jen Gallons, and I'm sitting on behalf of Tracy Katzmal, who will be here in a little bit, as well as Michelle Kohler. So at this time, we can start public comments. Please announce your name and come to the microphone. Any public comments? Sure.
So I'm Pam Mendelsohn. I'm a District 28 resident, and I also have been a teacher here for 34 years. I'm about to retire. I guess there are two things, as I know you're going to be talking about schedule later, that concern me. One has to do with the process that we are going through to determine what we're going to do. I don't think anyone's going to argue that we don't need to look at math and math minutes. But my concern is that the decisions that are being made seem to be being made very, very quickly. And I hope that we will stop and be thoughtful about what are the repercussions of what we're doing, and that we are not having a knee-jerk reaction to a need that without really stopping to think about what are the costs of what we're doing. I also hope that this process would be collaborative. Right now, I don't feel like it's been that way. Teachers are the people who work here every day, who work with the kids, who understand probably more than most what the needs are, and yet I don't know that there's been a lot of, so what will happen? What will happen if? And I hope that we look not only at the collaborative process, but also what are our values? Do these things that we're thinking about doing, do they fit with not only our need for more math minutes, but the other values that we have as District 28 and the consequences? The other thing that I'm very concerned about is culture. You know, I've been here for 34 years. When I got hired, the person who hired me said to me that the biggest strength of this district was that we had the most professional staff on the North Shore. And I went, well, I want to work for you. And we've never had a union, and part of the reason was because we did not want an adversarial relationship with parents, with administration, or within our building. We work together to solve problems. I'm concerned about what I see in the community right now. I see a lot of blaming, and I see a lot of blaming teachers. And I am afraid that we are listening to a small group of pretty vocal people who don't have many good things to say about educators who have been trained and who have given their lives to these children. I've heard that there have been lots of demands. I've seen it, where parents have gone over teachers' heads, gone to administration, and the demands have been met. And that parents have complained that their kids are struggling. Well, I'd like to ask the board, administration, and parents why that's a bad thing. I think education and learning is a struggle. And part of the reason I moved here, to be honest, and my 3 children came here, was because this place cared. And this was a place that if they were going to struggle, that I wanted them to be. Because I knew that there were people who would take the time to help them work through that. The only way kids are going to learn grit, the only way they're going to learn resilience, the only way they're going to learn that they can work through this is if somebody helps them and they work through it. And I'm not convinced that if we don't do that, that is going to happen anywhere else. And I fear for children who don't struggle till they get to high school or college, because those are the kids that hurt themselves because they don't think they can get through it. I don't want that to be the kids that I taught here. I've worked here for 34 years. I love the people here. I moved here because people cared. I was fortunate enough to have 3 daughters who went through here, and they had a lot of these teachers, and I am so grateful. And I hope you'll bring us into the process, and I hope that there'll be thoughtful consideration and that we will not decide in 2 to 3 weeks without really looking at what it will do. Because I don't want to be back here in 4 years going, okay, math is okay now, science is not, social studies is not, because we didn't look at what would happen. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can you turn up the mic? We're having trouble hearing.
It's not a microphone, it's just picking up the sound for the recording.
So please speak up.
Just speak up, thank you. And just a reminder that we have to keep public comments to 3 minutes each. Thank you. And say your name, please.
Yes, I'm Marie Junkman. I'm a mom of 2 at Greenbrier Elementary School. And I just wanted to get up here today and speak from a mindset of a person that wears many different hats in this district. Currently, I'm a parent. I'm the Greenbrier PTO, one of the PTO presidents. I'm a mom. One of my 3 college degrees was in education, and I currently sub in the district. And currently, I just want to say I'm very proud of a lot of things that I'm seeing in the district. Just yesterday, I was part of the Golden Apple nomination committee. They came and they talked about Jeremy Bartunek, and I just want to applaud the arts here and the music program. There's great things happening, and I just can't wait to see what's next. But Jeremy's one to say, and to always ask, what's next and how can I enrich my students in District 28? What I'm seeing in elementary school right now, I'm seeing positive responses. There's more homework. There's creative math instruction with rotations. I'm seeing spelling tests. I'm seeing great things happening in language arts, opinion pieces that are part of the grammar. I'm seeing the importance of kindness. I'm seeing coping strategies such as Calm Classroom. And Greenbrier is eventually going to get a comfort dog. These comfort techniques and the ability to cope with stress are actually, sadly, going to be even more important in the years to come as our kids face social media pressures and insane academic pressures. I personally can't speak to what has happened in the past with some of the math placements last year. I do absolutely feel for those kids, and in my eyes, they've been open to what has been going on. I believe that we truly are headed in a positive direction. I think the administration is doing a good job listening. I do think that 60 minutes of math is important because time corresponds to success. I'm pleased to hear about the 3 different sections of math that are going to possibly be offered next year. However, I would challenge the administration as you dig through this math process to see if there are what's causing this discrepancy in math. Is it because certain teachers? Are there ways that you can collaboratively bring teachers together? Though maybe there's 2 teachers that can work together. Sometimes it seems like one teacher might not be reaching all other students. So I would just look to see maybe there's one teacher that really is excelling in math and look to what they're doing. To us parents, I think we have to remember that we are as much involved in our children's instruction as the teachers. I know we are all so very busy, but it's important to find areas that our kids might be struggling in along the way. And I think so many of the kids are getting pushed to the point of nervous breakdowns. The anxiety is running really high. I see it every day. I see lots of testing going on. There's MAP, there's COGAT. Right now there's all this placement anxiety for the 5th graders. My son is one of those students that's going to be taking this test this week. I think that we need to look at some of the test data and find ways to help the kids slipping through the cracks. My concern is more about the kids slipping through the cracks than those kids that are excelling. I think so many of the kids in this district are actually doing quite well, but there shouldn't be kids slipping through the cracks, and let's find ways to improve those kids that are slipping through the cracks. I'm also concerned for the kids who feel inadequate because they don't feel like they're in the accelerated classes. You know what, it's okay sometimes to be just average. Not everyone is going to always be in the accelerated classes. However, I think we all need to really work hard to try to drive excellence and work as hard as we can to the kids' potentials. As with any district, one that wants to be excellent, I believe that we should always be looking at what is next, what has been good and what has been bad, and make changes. And you know what? Change is the theme of life, and we need to work together. I truly feel blessed that my kids are part of this district. It is still a district full of excellent teachers and invaluable experiences for our students. And I believe that our students will come out into the world well prepared in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other public comments? Okay.
Hi, my name's Leslie Hurst. I'm a resident of Northbrook and a longtime parent of District 28 students. As we commemorate the one-year anniversary of the math collapse last year and enjoy all the improvements being made by the administration, I anxiously await the announcement of the math committee's work. Specifically, I await the revelation of the curricular resources, methodology, and training that teachers and staff will utilize going forward with the expectation from parents of ever better math education for our kids. I reiterate my public request for a public forum and dialogue with the math team before the purchase of the resource to help parents understand what tool has been chosen, why, how teachers and how teachers have been instructed to use it. How will this new tool facilitate differentiation, the hallmark of District 28's excellent teachers? When will the new track placement criteria be announced? And how will the new resource and the new pathways integrate? Is it the district's goal to employ this new curriculum in a step towards building the model of math excellence on the North Shore? Can teachers use the curriculum effectively to achieve that goal? And can we parents have a dialogue with teachers to better understand and build a level of confidence that was so horribly shaken last year? I'm convinced this is a pivotal crossroads for the district, and I look forward to learning what's in store for our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Chris Eisen. I've been a parent in District 28 for at least 15 years. I had 2 kids go through GBN, and now I have a 6th grader, Olivia, who's having a good year, so we're happy about that. I want to say thank you to the district for listening. I appreciate that you've heard us and that you're trying to make changes to go forward to improve our math program. I have a few questions, so that's why I thought I would just make a comment. I've enjoyed having the updates each month when we come to the board meeting, so I'd like that to continue. If there's a small decision that has been made, I'd love to hear about what it is, you know, why the decision was made, what were the other choices, you know, just be a little bit more involved in the process because we actually care about what's going on. I mean, I was here the week of Thanksgiving when I could have been cooking. You know, I've been coming to these meetings, you know, for the majority of them for the last year, and it's because I care about the district. The next thing I'd like to know is I know you're deciding on curriculum, scheduling, math minutes, you know, is there gonna be teachers that are hired? We'd like to know, has any of those decisions been made? Even if it's a small something, you may be more qualified than me to judge why that's a good decision, but I'd like to hear why you made that decision. So, anyways, thank you, and we wanna hear what you have to say. So.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
My name's Erin Ryan, and I have a daughter at Northbrook Junior High and a son who's at Glenbrook North, who was previously at Northbrook Junior High. I apologize up front that I don't have a prepared comment. Thank you for the teachers and parents for raising hand. You did. I just want to say that overall, on the whole, my children have and continue to receive an excellent education. Sorry, that's not. On a whole, my children have and continue to receive an excellent education in District 28. I am here, though, because my daughter does struggle specifically with math. However, she does struggle in a few other classes as well. And I just wanted to get up and voice my concern. She is someone who works very hard and spends lots of hours, so that's why I wanted to stand up and say something that yesterday she spent probably from 5 p.m. till midnight. Got up again 6 a.m. this morning to finish her work in order so she could get to school by 8:10 for tutorial, as well as go to tutorial at lunchtime and during X block sometimes. We've cut out all extracurricular activities except for a 45-minute dance class. So math is her area that she struggles the most, and so we are looking at extra help there. She does the Alex subscription. She just talked to her teacher today to get that extended because I think that was going to run out. She also goes to extra help for that, and she still seems to struggle. Even when there was, I believe, overall class poor performance on one test, the teacher had them went over the material again, because normally there isn't a reassessment for an individual student, but for a class, they didn't perform very well. So they went and did some kind of refresher and then proceeded to take the test later in that same class period, where my daughter performed poorly again. So I think there are some individual struggles, and that I am addressing with the school directly, but I just wanted to voice that overall, how sometimes, she has, her difficulties with math. Anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kelly Pfeiffer, and I currently have a 6th grader. And I have 3 kids who started kindergarten in D28 and are now either in college or out of college. I wanted to just kind of put out there that, first of all, I think it's great that you guys are seriously considering all the concerns about the math program. I fully support that, but kind of to your point, I will say that I think you have to be so careful about making decisions hastily. If you're, and I have a 6th grader, right? I want her to benefit from the changes, but at the same time, in my long history of being involved with the district, I can say that it hasn't always, proven to be beneficial to make decisions quickly. So if we're gonna take 25% of the minutes from something, I don't know. I don't know what's been decided or is being discussed, but what I do feel strongly about is that the minutes should not come from language arts. Now, I don't know if that's being considered, but when I looked at the way the time is structured in junior high, and I see that, of course, language arts is getting the most time daily, I just have to say that by taking the minutes away from language arts, and again, I apologize if I'm wasting your time by even bringing this up. If you do that, in just a few years, I feel that we will see the same problem that we've seen with math or with anything else. If you look at the history of language arts, for years, we had Ellen Keene, right? Ellen Keene. I just want to say, and I don't know if anyone's aware, being an educator myself, my first son started Greenbrier in 1999 as a kindergartner. By 1st grade, I was asking Jill Weininger, our principal, if I could see the scope and sequence. And she said, oh, we don't have a scope and sequence. And I was really surprised because that's all I knew. That said, my kids all the way up have pretty much had outstanding teachers. I mean, of course, some aren't, haven't been as great for my personal, my children personally. But overall, I feel like, our staff rocks. I mean, they care, and I do feel they care. But I look at the language arts program from 1999 until, maybe more recently, and I see how, all of a sudden grammar didn't matter anymore. So we weren't teaching grammar. then people, maybe, I don't know if it was the staff or administration or parents or a combination would realize, hey, you know, our kids can't form the sentences right. No phonics. I mean, I don't, you know, that was crazy to me. So I just felt like we kind of, and no offense, Ellen Keene, wherever you are, but I just feel like we followed on this path of everything she said. We don't need to teach writing skills because writing will come from reading. I mean, it's just one thing after another. And so I feel like we need to tread, we're getting in a good place. I feel like with, you know, including a well-rounded education with language arts, at least in my own child's experience. And I just want to caution if you are considering taking the time from language arts, please think it through. I don't know what the answer is. I understand the difficulty of staff, you know, and how is that going to affect our staff? And, you know, for all the staff members here, I just want to say, truly, you know, parents love you guys. I mean, don't feel like because there's complaints, because there's been a history in certain situations with groups of kids in certain.
Sorry, Kelly, can you just speak into the microphone?
I'm so sorry.
The recording. I appreciate
I apologize.
you speaking to the group as well.
I just wanted to say that
Yeah.
staff, you are so appreciated, and because there are complaints sometimes about, you know, certain pathways with the staff or the education that's, you know, happening, please don't feel that it's personal for everyone, because it certainly isn't. And I hear from friends and just, you know, being at social events, people mostly talking about the good. We aren't focusing all the time on the struggles. So I guess, you know, my time is probably up. I just wanted to say, please think, you know, very carefully before you make that decision. And there's also Lucy Culkin out there. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to say my name, Colette O Regan, but as you know, this is my year anniversary for not missing a meeting, so I'm sure you know my name by now. I would like to go back where none of you knew my name, and I was just a stay-at-home mom taking care of my 7 children. But my son Robbie got caught up in the G scandal, as I call it, last year. Pam, a couple of us parents have raised a lot of questions. If it was your child, you would have done the same thing. I am not a teacher. I cannot stand here and say I am an educator. I'm not. Part of the problem is there are so many educators and teachers that live in District 28, work in 28, or work somewhere else. They know the system. I didn't know the system. I didn't know that Robbie, as you say, I wish he was struggling. Robbie was just pushed through. He's doing great. He had all A's. And then with SBG, he had all 3s. And the next thing you know, my son is placed in what I call remedial math at the high school. So I didn't even know that he should have been pushed. I do blame that, Larry. We needed to be more proactive. You're the leader. You're top dog. More proactive on your part. Last year didn't just pop up. If you look at the numbers, it's been a slow, gradual increase of G. Yes, last year, thank you, Jesus, it was a huge, so we could grab it and go, what is going on? There was always a problem with math. Last year, it just really stood out to us because of everything. I agree, let's not be reactive.
I'm sorry, Colette, can you address the board?
Yes,
and not
we
Mrs.
want
Mendelsohn?
everyone, we do not want a reaction to this. Unfortunately, that's sometimes what you get when we had the mess we had last year. So I agree. Take your time, but we do need this fixed, and time is of the essence. I have a kindergartner. I want it fixed properly, okay? But I also think math is really important, and some things are going to get cut. That's life. I don't know what's going to get cut, but I think math, we do need the more math minutes. So going forward, I'm going to agree with Pam again. If you don't think the teachers were involved, believe me, as a parent, there's been no collaboration. Chris, how many emails have I said, please, I want to collaborate. I know I'm not an educator. Oh, Mrs. Reagan, I've sent you every email I can to help you. You've never reached out to me. I don't even know what you guys are looking at. Like I said, I have a kindergartner. Word on the street is there probably is already a curriculum you've picked. Wow, I thought you were going to let us see it. Where's the math forum? When are you ever going to listen to us parents? I pay taxes. These are my children. Again, I'm invested much more than people because I have so many kids here. Okay, I'm not gone in 2 years. I have a kindergartner. Why are you not including us parents? As an administration, you need us. We need you. I told you in December, Larry, we don't need adversarial relationship. Let's be collaborative. And you smiled. Where's the collaboration? Let's start helping each other. Your kids are not going to be doing this math. My kids are. And because I have kids in college, I know how important this is. When you have little kids, these parents don't understand the ramifications. Chris, you said it. It's very hard to take young parents and talk about college. Let's have a night and let's see. Let some parents who are interested benefit. I have that benefit because I have so many children. But let's share that. That's why, Pam, I'm so involved, because I love people. I don't want any person to end up where I was, okay? God is good to me, and we figured it out. But I would never, ever want
Colette,
any
please
parent.
address the board.
I would
This
never
is not
want
Mrs.
any
Mendelsohn.
parent to go through what I went through. That is why I'm so invested. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Hi, my name is Bryce Buden. I'm a Westmore parent. I just have a brief comment that I would like to echo the sentiments for a kind of a public, maybe just focus on the math, what you're trying to select before sort of the final trigger is pulled, so to speak. I think that would be really helpful because right now it just seems like there's a lot of rumors or people are passing on what they're hearing, but no one really knows, and I think just some kind of specific forum to present just that subject matter would be really helpful for the community.
Thank you.
My name is Jessica Love. I'm a District 28 resident. I have two children, one who is now a freshman at GBN who came through Northbrook Junior High, and I have a 7th grader here at Northbrook Junior High. And I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with a number of my neighbors who've presented comments before, because I think it would be very surprising to them to, as professionals in their own industry, have people come in and question their decisions and ask for transparency before decisions are made rather than accepting your professional judgment. You're trained as educators and administrators, and I entrust you as a citizen to use your degree and your experience to make the best decision for our children. I also am concerned that decisions may be made hastily with potentially a short view, specifically the transition from junior high to high school with math placement. And that in addition to looking at that transition, because it is impactful and it's important to the students and to the families, that you also take a look at the long-term data for how those students are performing at the conclusion of their high school and beyond, because that's ultimately what we're all preparing them for, is to go out into the world. And I'm concerned that if you're looking at a subset of data, performance data and test data, that you may not make an appropriate decision. So please take the long view and know that as a resident and as a parent, I entrust you to make the best decision for our children. And when it comes to math curriculum, textbooks, and any other curriculum, it's up to administration, it's up to department staff, and it's up to teachers to make that decision. We'll hold you accountable in how our kids do in the long run, but you don't know an answer to me on what you're going to do when you make the decision. Just let me know what it was afterwards.
Thank you.
Good evening, Bo Herbst, resident here in 28 with a number of kids who've gone through and are currently going through. You do owe me an answer, right? Parents are involved. You're professionals, we trust you, and we trusted you all the way through last year when we had a collapse of the math. So, look, we want you to do your job, you're the professionals, but when something like that happens, by God, we gotta step in. I mean, there were several things that were put in place after we became engaged that really helped the math program moving forward. So we appreciate all those efforts, but again, trust, yes, we trusted you for years with many of our children that came through here. But when something like that happens last year, we felt the need to get engaged. You've got a lot of smart and intelligent, engaged parents here. You could benefit from a dialogue with us. You get lots of professionals, both educational and other kinds of professionals, and very invested stay-at-home parents. We can help you. Engage with us, create that dialogue layer that you and I talked about in a couple of our meetings. Let's get everybody working together towards a solution. And yeah, granted, you're the professionals. We're going to trust you as far as we can. But after last year, we're going to get more invested. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Maura Christian. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, so I don't have any prepared remarks, but I would like to say that I have a second grader and a sixth grader, and for the most part, we've been extremely impressed and pleased with the schools and almost all of the teachers that we have. And one of the things that I haven't heard is how this happened. There's been a lot of discussion about what might happen in the future to fix this, but I haven't heard an explanation of how we got here, which I think is part of the problem. And I don't know if this has happened to or what degree it's happened, but I implore you to look to the teachers. For what I see from my kids going through, these teachers are committed, they are talented, they are smart, and they want to make improvements. And so I ask that you reach out to them for their opinions. And as far as the parental involvement, I think we need to be kept informed of what's going on. But in all due respect to the parents here, I want the people who are the educators and who have a background in this selecting the curriculum and making the changes. But again, I would hope that we wouldn't be making broad changes to the schedule, and I would reiterate what was said earlier, that please don't take any minutes from language arts, because we're going to find ourselves back in the same problem, and you'll have parents screaming about language arts scores. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Raju. I'm a parent in the district. I just wanted to say this. Change is really hard. Everyone is unhappy when something gets cut that they have a personal affinity for, or it doesn't benefit their child, or a teacher. We cut time for teachers, but change is also a part of life. And I think collectively we just have to be super respectful of the teachers that we ask to teach our children every day, the administrators that I know are working really hard, the parents who are so personally invested in their children, and just I know it's just hard to watch sometimes when we're heading towards an adversary relationship. We had a frustrating year last year with some things that happened, but I mean, we all want to move forward, and I just ask that everyone be respectful of each other, and that we just try our best to respect each other, respect the teachers that educate our kids, the administrators that are working very hard, and the parents that just really just are very obviously emotionally involved in the process because it's their kids. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julia Millman. I am also a District 28 parent, obviously. And I moved into the district about 5 years ago when my oldest started first grade. And I wanted to tell you about a little conversation that happened with the previous principal at Westmore, not Ms. Sturgill, who is right now, but the previous gentleman. I'm sorry, I forget his name. My husband and I met him, and we wanted to know how the school operates, of what they think about homework and just the curriculum, et cetera, et cetera. And then when we got to talking about homework, he said, well, the teachers are not allowed to give kids homework. And I was really surprised by that. Being raised actually in the former Soviet Union, to me that was like a shock. How could kids not get homework? And my husband asked why, and he started explaining the theory behind what had been happening at that time. And then he said, you know what, if you're going to ask teachers for homework, they're actually going to get fired if we ever find out that they gave your kids homework. I could not believe what I heard him say, and I actually decided to test this theory once my daughter went into first grade, and I asked her teacher for homework, and he actually said exactly the same thing. He said, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to give your kid homework. And then he asked, if we could please respect this so that we don't talk about this further. And now when I questioned him further regarding why this is happening, he said, I'm sorry, I can't talk about it. So I would really encourage to have a conversation with us as parents, because I do think that we deserve all the answers as far as why things are happening the way that they're happening. And also have a conversation with the teachers, because I get a feeling the teachers are afraid of the administration, and they are afraid to tell us something that's a rumor, that's possibly a rumor or may not be a rumor, but they're just afraid to talk to us as parents because they don't know what they're allowed to say, what they're not allowed to say. But when in talking with the teachers, a lot of parents really get this feeling that they're just not saying something because they're not allowed. So just take that into consideration, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mara Smith. I have a second grader and 2 juniors at GBN. And the math issue, I think, has gone back a long time, because I've only gone into the school one time ever, and that was when my daughter was in 7th grade. She was on the Excel track all the way through math. I did not think she was prepared and knew algebra well enough, so I had her retake it again, which is usually unheard of, and take it again in 8th grade, because algebra is such a basis, of all the future math courses. So I had her take it again so that she could be prepared for GBN. So I basically held her back a year. That's the only time I've ever gone in. But I just didn't think she had strong enough math skills coming out of her 7th grade Excel algebra class. I think in general there's an issue about not being prepared for the placement test for GBN. She has a twin brother, and if you don't do well on that placement test, you really have very little you can do. They weren't prepared. He wasn't prepared for the placement test. We had to appeal every single class. He got placed improperly because he wasn't prepared for that and for the testing. He had to work his way up to, eventually then sophomore year and junior year to get in all honors classes. But because of his initial 8th grade placement, since parents don't have input into GBN's placement, and it's only based off the standardized tests that they take in 8th grade, it was a battle that he had to fight and appeal every year and move himself up. But I think that's an issue, because we want them to be doing better on the testing so that they can get properly placed when they get to the high school.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay.
Hi, my
Yeah,
name
next.
is Hillary
Oh.
Nassau-Yanai.
Sorry.
I am the math specialist at Meadowbrook. I've been in this district for only 15 years, but it is definitely my home. And I just wanted to take this time to, on my behalf, on the behalf of many, many teachers, we love working here. We are thankful that we have a good working relationship with our building administration and our district administration. I would never want a union, nor would I ever join a union. I prefer the relationship we have. I have been lucky enough to have been on many curricular committees, the math committee being the latest one, where we've taken a slow and deliberate and thoughtful process, leaving no stone unturned, letting every person's voice be heard, so that when we are at that point, we will have a consensus and we will be able to move forward with confidence that we are doing the right thing. And I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be on the committee and to be a member of this wonderful district. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Hearing no other public comments, we will move on to Superintendent Report.
So I want to thank you all for sharing your thoughts, opinions, comments. Lots of good comments, lots of comments that appear to be maybe diametrically opposed in some way, and that's okay. We take all feedback, whether it's from teachers or parents, community members who don't have kids anymore. And, we work with that, and we see what we can do, and that's not going to change. It was brought to my attention that an email was circulated recently that had some inaccurate information in it. So I'm going to take a few minutes to correct that information, that misinformation. The focus of the email was on communication, transparency, and math. The district has embarked on, I think a lot of you know this, a multi-pronged effort to enhance our communication. We've implemented live streaming at monthly board meetings. We've archived the footage of that, so if people can't make it, they can watch it at any time. This email erroneously stated that the district was considering not continuing live streaming, and that's false. Our plans have never changed or wavered from live streaming our meetings. We've done lots of other things. We've expanded the content of our monthly board briefs newsletter. Our board packets are online. We've expanded social media coverage. We've developed short informational videos on various topics. Some of you may recall the Number Talks one that was done recently for math. We formed a communications advisory committee that's met 3 times so far. We asked for a 3-meeting commitment from folks, and we've expanded that to a 4th meeting. Our website's constantly being updated. We're in the process of developing a strategic dashboard. We put out a math parent survey. Some of you may have taken that. We've held 2 math parent forums to share progress, answer questions, and seek input. And as stated at previous meetings, we are scheduling additional forums. Math updates at board meetings, whether it's been reporting out on progress of the math committee's work or reporting on achievement data, has occurred. I actually went back over the last year and looked at 12 board meetings. 11 of those 12 board meetings had math updates. So we are doing everything we can to make sure that people are informed. As we progress with our work, as the math committee progresses with its work, we're going to continue to report out on that progress. I heard some people referencing that the math resources have already been selected. No, they have not. Rumors are a terrible thing. So anything you can do to stomp those out would be appreciated. In addition to all of this, we've met with parents, responded to emails, answered questions, and listened to comments. And we're going to continue to do that. That's not going to change. We will continue to do that. My hope is that this email was not intentionally misleading. And in the future, I invite anyone who has a question or concern to call me or any staff member. A simple phone call to share your questions or concerns goes a long way toward building our partnership. Emails like this, unfortunately, do the opposite. So let's have a positive relationship. And I've heard several of you say the same thing. So there's no disagreement with that. We are going to be moving forward positively. There are more math forums that are being scheduled, so it's not ever going to end. Our communication is not ever going to stop, and our collaboration is going to continue on. So thank you for that. And for those of you that have reached out and presented, whether it's a supportive comment or a critical comment, we accept all those, and we appreciate your feedback. Okay.
The next item is the State of 28 Annual Report.
Yeah, you want to turn that on? Okay. All right, so I think a lot of you know that this is a report I've been doing for several years now. I do take this to any of the PTOs that want to hear this. So I'm not going to go through every slide kind of point by point. The first several I tend to kind of review in the past, different things that have happened. And so I rather than kind of going through all of these, because a lot of you were here when these things were happening, I will, if my computer cooperates, I will go through. I think it's frozen. It was frozen, so I got to go back in. Okay, here we go. Okay, so lots of things. Commission on the study of learning time. That's when we added time to the instructional day for our elementary kids. When we started extended day kindergarten in 12-13, we had other things going on. Some of our issues are buildings and grounds. When we purchased land from the Northbrook United Methodist Church, and that was part of our Westmore expansion. In 13-14 is when we added the STEM class at NB28, and then just different things through the years. So I'm going to kind of speed through this so we can get through. It's in the packet. If someone wants to look at it, later, you can do that. So, and if you have any questions, we can certainly do that. 1920, I'll pause just a little bit, but I don't want to pause too long because we do have the strategic plan update. So a lot of this stuff will be discussed there, whether it's cybersecurity, our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. And so with that, we'll jump right into some of these facts and figures. I do try to give a historical perspective. I think they're interesting, and it paints a picture of how the district has evolved over time. This is the Greenbrier enrollment, and you'll see as you go way back to 06, 07, 08, and we were in that low 300s. We put the addition on for a reason, and that's the reason. We had these huge numbers coming down the pike. And for the most part, they've stayed steady. We do have a drop, this year, and we'll see, how that plays out. Meadowbrook's high water mark in the recent past was, 2005? And it kind of took a long, slow glide down to that 374, and now it's building its way back up. So we're going to see where this goes for the future. Enrollment, you all know, I think, all the various housing kinds of activity that's going on, whether it's townhomes or apartment buildings, et cetera, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Westmore, now just be careful with this. Some of this is pre-K because we added the pre-K program. So some of that spike is directly related to the addition of 3- and 4-year-olds. However, I will say, even if you pull those out, Westmore is above their historical average. So obviously we're keeping our eye on that.
What's the impact for the preschool, roughly? Do you recall?
The numbers?
Yeah.
So in the morning, we would have at most about 45, and in the afternoon, the same, about 45.
So it was about out of 90?
So as you know, with preschool, when a child turns 3 years old, they can come into the program. So depending upon when you kind of take the temperature, it's going to be lower if it's a January number. It's going to be higher if it's a May number. Yeah, so it's probably lower than that.
Okay.
This is more like a January number. And Kelly, I don't know if you remember what the breakout of the pre-K was or not. I wants to scroll to it. So Northbrook Junior High, hangs around kind of that 600. Way back, it got up to 640. So some of you know we did a demographics report last March. And this demographer is used in the area, and it tends to be fairly accurate. So one thing we're keeping our eye on is his prediction that Northbrook Junior High is going to go to 700. Not immediately, but over time. We're gonna seek an update to that because we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of that study, and obviously we're keeping our eye on that.
Larry, when you say keeping an eye on that, what does that mean?
So each year we would be tracking the enrollment, and we'll also be looking at our cohort of children in the younger grades. So obviously 5th grade has the biggest impact for next year, but by looking at 4th grade, 3rd grade, 2nd grade, we can get a sense of, is that starting to happen or not?
What is the capacity for NBJH? Is there a number?
No. Well, there is a number.
Yeah.
But whenever you go through these things, the first thing you do is you use space, right, as creatively as you can.
Mm-hmm.
We did a $5 million addition renovation on this, I think in 2008, if I remember correctly. For those of you that don't know, we're landlocked. Pretty much the site that this building sits on is owned by the school district, and everything else is owned by the park district. So we don't own the land around us. So the enrollment report,
80.
Okay.
So pretty close with 9.
Okay. And then if we look at, I got everybody. This is just line graphs that kind of show what's happened over time with the 4 schools. Total enrollment has jumped up, and again, some of that's from preschool. You'll also notice we track our low income. There's a little gap in there in 2015, and I just tell people the federal government changed the rules. Our numbers spiked up to 7%, and across the nation, everything spiked up, and they said, we didn't mean to do that. And they pulled it back, and so they're using the same numbers. So we're right around 3% low income. This particular slide will show the ethnicity. So the blue is Caucasian, and if you go at the very bottom, that's the year 2006, if you can't see that. And as you go up, that's what happens to the ethnicity in District 28. Still predominantly Caucasian at 77%. But you'll notice that our Hispanic population has grown quite a bit, as well as our Asian and our 2 or more races population. Languages spoken in the home. So these would be for students who are receiving services, English language services. This shows way back to 2013. So just as an example, all the way on the left, is the Russian 5-year, or actually more than that, 2, 4, 7 years of the number of kids we've been servicing who have Russian as their primary language. And for several years it was the primary language, or the number 1 secondary language, but Korean has now jumped up with that. Spanish has dropped a little bit through the years. If you want to look again, if you can't see this very well and you want to look at this more detail, it's in the board packet on the website. Home language, not English. So now we're looking at not so much individual languages, but we have about 140 students who are in the language the primary language is other than English in the home. How does that translate into our EL population and how they're doing or how they're coming into the district and progressing through the years? So this particular bar graph will show the historical look. This is what's called the access test, and it basically tests a child's ability in English, and it's designed for second language students. So if you look at, say, the last 3 years, if you look at the blue, so those would be the students who are considered, they know no English, essentially. They're entering or they're at the very beginning stages of language development. And then as you move up to level 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, you get more proficient with the English language. Obviously, when the blues and the reds are bigger, there are more challenges for us, as educators to help kids learn the language and learn the academic language in particular. We also track some social work data. These would be presenting issues. Listed on here, we have at the very bottom, and it's in alphabetical order, from anxiety to bullying to crisis intervention, depression, all the way up to self-harm, social skills, suicide ideation, and then there's a whole smattering of other. So the purple line represents last year's data. There are spikes that happen through the years with different pieces of this. Some of this Kelly and I have talked about. We want to tighten up how our social workers are expected to kind of track this data, because it's quite a task to do this over the course of the entire year. But we do pay attention to this, and we use it to try to help our kids with social emotional learning and things like that. IEPs, special education. So we have listed here basically 2 types, what are called speech-only IEPs in the red, and the blue would be considered all the other IEPs that students may be eligible for according to federal law. .504 plans are similar to special education plans, just not quite as formal. Now, just so the board knows, I asked Kelly to look at the data. The slide you have, which was the original one that was put in, we've corrected that to the one that's on the board, okay? Because we looked at that and we thought, well, this doesn't seem right. There's just too big of a spike. So Kelly went back and recalculated the previous 2 years. And the problem is that 504s don't have to be identified as an academic 504, a medical 504, or a social emotional 504. It's just a 504. And then what we have to do is take a look at each one to determine, we break it out into these categories because we think it's helpful for us to kind of monitor how many medical IEPs we have, or 504s, et cetera. So, and then we've, Kelly added a multiple category that didn't seem to fit in any of those 3. So this is going to be the new way that we're going to be tracking this. Teacher retention, we're kind of right around 90%, and it's really, if someone takes a child care leave of absence for 1 year and they come back the following year, it's counted as not being retained for the year that you're off. Of course, retirements, all those kinds of things play into the teacher retention rate. All right, now we have a series of slides that are on finances. This is a very good slide if you live in District 28. What this says is, when Springfield has a problem and when Washington, D.C. has a problem, we are insulated a great deal, not completely, but a great deal, because 95% of our funding comes from the local taxpayer. Okay, in many districts, you may have only 80%, 70%, 60%, 50%, depending upon the type of district. So. One of the things we wrestle with every year are tax objections or tax appeals. If an appeal goes through, the board of, is it called the Board of Appeals, Jessica? Do you?
Board of Review.
Board of Review. Typically what happens is we get our attorney involved, they have their attorney involved, the Board of Review is involved, and in the end we end up settling. We fight so that it doesn't go all the way to the point where they want it, but we also need to be mindful that in some respects we're fighting for the community. Most of these, or a lot of these, are bigger businesses and corporations. You'll see that 2017 tax year, we've returned almost $3 million because of this situation. So I think we're done. I don't know if we can ever say we're done, but for 2020 we'll be done with 2017 appeals. Is that what you're saying? Oh, with the big Northbrook Court settlement. Got it. Okay. So the 2018, 2019, and 2020 refunds will grow each year. So as things wind their way through the courts, the money that has to be paid back will come out of the existing taxes that we get for that school year. Interest income. This is a picture of the economy. So there were years when we had interest of 1.7, 1.8 million, 1.9 million. And then interest rates, as you all know, tanked. And they are fighting their way back right now. Jessica's instituted a little bit of a different approach, trying to invest more of our money, but still making sure we have enough cash flow, right, so that we can pay our bills each month. So that's also helped with the 18-19, and hopefully we'll see 19-20 looking good too. District expenditures by fiscal year. So these are our 5 major funds. The spikes tell the story of the 3 building additions that we've done through the years. And that's what that represents. Your taxes, my taxes, are based on the Consumer Price Index. Our revenue growth each year is limited to the Consumer Price Index, plus anything that's called new growth. So encourage your neighbor to put an extra bedroom or an extra garage. That's considered new growth. So that comes in addition to the Consumer Price Index. And of course, if you have a vacant or brown piece of land and all of a sudden there's a business or a building there, that's considered new growth also. And we do have a slide that'll show new growth over time. The equalized assessed valuation, so your property has a specific EAV. This is just simply all the EAV in the district. Another tale or another picture of the economy. When EAV goes down, the tax rate goes up. When EAV goes up, the tax rate goes down. Your taxes don't go down because the Consumer Price Index determines how much we pay every year. So I suppose if the Consumer Price Index were -2, I don't know what they do. I don't know if they give us 0 or if they'd actually take money away. But it's really the CPI that determines taxes every year. So new property, we're very excited whenever new property comes on the tax rolls because it gives the community more money for the district to invest in its schools, whether it's through teachers or buildings or things like that. So 2017 was a very good year, as they say. 2018 was more normal. We'll see what 2019 brings. About 60% of the local tax bill, freight, if you will, is paid by the homeowner. And about 37% is paid on the commercial side. Industrial, you can see, is about 2.5%. There is a farm. I mean, it always shows up, but it's always 0% because it's such a small amount. I would expect, Jessica, you tell me if I'm wrong, that with the new assessment process that's going on in Cook County, that there's an attempt to swing some of the freight back away from the resident and toward the commercial side. Is that fair?
That's fair. There's a new assessment process happening in Cook County that is causing that shift.
So
This is old data. That data has not yet been released for our area. We should receive that this summer.
okay. We, like I said, we're insulated, but we're not completely out of the woods when it comes to state and federal spending. If you look at the blue, that would be the state funding that we receive every year, and the red would be the Fed. So if you add those two numbers together on any given year, you're at about $2 million. So if all of a sudden Springfield and the Fed said, we're not going to give you any money, whether they're more important districts or more poorer districts, or we're not giving any schools any money anymore, we're not, just so you know, we're not running a $2 million surplus every year. So that would be a problem. Do I see the federal government or the state government doing that? No. But if, for instance, they drop by 20% one year, you know, that would be an impact for us.
Do you know for the state and federal money, how much is restricted, like special programs like Title I, things like that, versus what is fungible money?
The majority of the state money is the general state aid money, which is supposedly to be used at the discretion of the district, although there are some caveats to how that should be used.
Okay, and then we have, we always track our fund balance. You know, we have had the Northbrook Court resettlement. Was that $3 million? So that was a $3 million repayment. You know, if we hadn't have had that, you know, we'd be up, you know, by $3 million more than where we're at now. Just so you know, the reason that the drop is there goes back to the 3 additions that we put on our schools. The last one, I mean, we were, with that interest income we were earning, like I added, I think, 2 or 3 years up, it was like $5 million. I mean, that was the Northbrook Junior High addition paid for with interest income. And then we got to Greenbrier, and so it brought us down a little bit. But at that point, the Westmore edition is the one that really brought us, you know, down from the 31 to the 23. And now we're hovering there, and we'll see where all the new growth takes us and where the CPI takes us. Speaking of new growth, you all know 1000 Skokie Boulevard has been in the works. So that's, it used, I don't know if it's still Lifetime Fitness, and there used to be a Children's Learning Adventure, which I don't think is part of that development anymore. But when I put this together, there was 338 apartments that they're in process of building. You all know Annette's Woods. Jessica, do you know how many of those homes have been built out?
I believe we've received impact fees for about half of those homes. We receive the impact fees when they're sold, not when they're completed in their building.
Okay, so you can see we have 32 there. Most of what I'm showing you is in the Westmore attendance, Meadowbrook attendance area. If you've driven downtown, you know Jacobs Townhomes has begun. I don't know if they've stalled out at this point or how that's, you know, playing out, but we're watching that development. And everyone, I think, knows about Green Acres, about 123 acres that's sitting out there.
Mary, for the ones that are done, do we have a sense of how many students we've gotten from them?
Are you asking about Annette's Woods, for instance, or?
Woods or the 1000 Skokie Boulevard, any of those that are.
So I don't think 1000 Skokie Boulevard is complete yet.
As far as I know, there's been no students from 1000 Skokie that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if it's occupied yet. I think we have one student from Annette's Woods, and we've received a handful from
Just a little
770.
little louder.
We've received a handful from 770 Skokie, which is not here.
Okay, and Deerbrook Mall development. So I've reported before the Village of Deerfield controls this. This is something we did not know about until it was already approved, but it's right on the Edens there. So I don't know if they've broken ground yet.
They've demolished the old buildings. They haven't broken ground on new construction yet.
So this is what that's supposedly going to look like. And then we have the TIF, the proposed TIF at Northbrook Court. The residential developer backed out of that. It's my understanding that they are in final stage of trying to get someone else on board to do the building. So it's going to stay as is, though. As I understand it, they're not, a new builder isn't going to come in and try to change that up. And I don't know.
I know they're trying to do that because if they make modifications, they will have to re-go through some of the village process, including reopening the issue of affordable housing. And so that's part of the calculations that they've done. So there's a strong incentive for them to find a new builder, but if they don't, it could change the dynamic of the whole project.
Okay, so this was approved before the affordable housing ordinance? Is that fair to say?
You don't know the status right now of the ordinance, but I know that the impetus to discuss it would be different than it was at the stage that this was initially approved with prior board.
Okay.
So that's part of the motivation behind their press to get somebody to just sort of step into the old contract. So we'll see if it happens.
The residential component is not TIF'd, correct?
No, in this project
It is TIF'd. Okay. It was $770 that they pulled it out. So we would get tuition fees up to a certain amount. So we did negotiate with the developer for that. So as I look to 2020 and beyond, safety and security is always going to be something that we're going to be looking at. We continue to keep our eye on our special education co-op and SSED. Of course, Meadowbrook enrollment for obvious reasons, and I've already talked about state and federal funding. There's every once in a while, there's just this little piece of TRS cost, pension cost shift that comes out of Springfield. Do they want to shift the liability off the state's books and onto the local taxpayers' books or not? I think with the current governor that's unlikely, but we don't know. Obviously, NBJH master schedule we're dealing with. The TIF we've talked about. There is a growing teacher shortage, and this is across the country, and it's not getting better at this point. And I did put the coronavirus up there because we do take our orders, if you will, from CDC and the Illinois Department of Public Health. I've had a couple of conversations with some parents, and really, what this concept comes down to is we can't tell a child or tell a family that unless they're sick, if they're sick, that they can't come to school. So unless something changes in the law, we deal with that. We are going to be putting out a communication either tomorrow or the next day, just informing our parents of standard practices we do every flu season with influenza A and B, which is extra cleaning on the touch points throughout the building. I mean, this is just something every year we do. So we're going to continue to do that this year. We monitor what goes on with the coronavirus. We do stay in touch with our state health department. And we're fortunate to have a nurse in each building. So, and they're on top of this too. Questions? Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jen. I know that Nate and Jonah really appreciated the board's willingness to delay the start and to cover so that we didn't miss a second concert in a row, so thank you. Next on the agenda, communications. To Larry for written communications.
I was just going to highlight 3 of the articles. So, love the article about our 8th grade boys basketball team. How do you go 50-0? In 3 seasons? I don't know, but they did it. So good for them. Someone had mentioned Jeremy Bartunik. I was able to attend the awards ceremony. These are the 30 top Golden Apple finalists in the state of Illinois, and they'll get down to 10. So there is another round, and we'll see how that goes. Is David Downing still here or not? And he was here. Okay, so David was a Golden Apple winner also. I don't know, three years ago or what? Yeah, 4. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Anyway, so and then there was an article about the local science fair. So we had 52 NB28 students participate, 34 gold medals, which means the 34, I think I'm correct, Pam, all go to the regional competition? Yeah. Okay, and thank you for your work with that. It's all very exciting. I know eventually some of our kids will go downstate also. So, any questions on any of the items?
If there's no questions on the written communications, we can do board calendar review.
I'm just going to see if I can get caught up here real quick.
There you're on.
Oh, thank you.
I think it's about page 75.
Yeah, thank you. The packets are too big. Okay, here we go. So coming up in March, you'll see we'll do our initial review of the Compensation Committee recommendations. March is always a month where if we need to do a reduction in force, but it's rarely needed. We'll talk about the NBJH master schedule tonight, and then we have notifications to retire, which Jessica will do, and the 5-year budget projections also.
Any questions on the calendar review? If not, approval of the minutes from both the regular and closed session of the last meeting. Were there any comments or corrections on the minutes? If not, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Member Gross?
Aye.
Member Gallinson?
Aye.
Member Fricchetti?
Aye.
Member Kohler?
Aye.
Member Silvershack?
Aye.
President Katzmull?
Aye.
Absent Member Gilmore.
Approval of the consent agenda. Were there any items anybody had to pull out of the consent agenda for discussion?
I had the bills and everything looked good.
Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda? If not, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
That we approve it.
Second.
Member Kohler?
Aye.
Member Silvershack?
Aye.
Member Gallinson?
Aye.
Member Fricchetti?
Aye.
Member Gross?
Aye.
President Katzmull?
Aye.
Absent Member Gilmore.
Committee reports. Finances. Jessica.
So in your board packet, you received the financial reports through the month ended January 31st, 2020, and the bills list payable for this month. After 7 months of the fiscal year, our monthly variance shows a 51% of the budget expended and 48% of the budgeted revenues received. We started receiving our tax monies, which is always very nice when looking at our cash flow and our investment process. Our food service sales to date are $188,749. Their operating statement for our food service providers shows a surplus of $1,030 for the month and a year-to-date operating surplus of $2,247. We are trending better than we were doing last year in this program. We did receive our preliminary insurance renewal information for next year. Our PPO is projected, our first renewal is always a little higher than we wind up finalizing because we continue to negotiate with our EBC cooperative, but our PPO is looking at a 6.5% increase, the HMO at a 5.2% increase, and a dental at a 1.4% increase. Our HMO and dental increases are right in our EBC pool's average increase, and the PPO is trending above. These preliminary rates are based on claims experienced for the period of November through October of this past year. It's their most current reporting period when they use these figures to start negotiating those rates. Just an update on our Meadowbrook building automated system update. We did submit our school maintenance project grant. It's that $50,000 matching grant from the state. We're waiting for approval on that. White has begun working on the project specifications, and we're on site this afternoon to gather more information at the school. We expect the bid documents to be issued on March 17th with responses due on April 7th. White is expecting to have a recommendation for approval at the April board meeting. I have automated clearinghouse vendor payments is the next topic I just wanted to bring to your attention. In an effort to increase efficiency and reduce costs in the business office, I've been researching options for electronic vendor payments. This payment process would still require board approval of the bills before the funds are dispersed. But I will be completing an application for Capital One to start this process. They have a 2% incentive rebate, and they'll partner with us in the finance software we use to identify vendors and set our system up to do that. So I'm expecting things like our utilities and such to be very easily switched over to this electronic payment. And then there's a list of the local and state federal requirements for the month that were completed.
Any questions on the financial report? If not, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. I'll second that.
Member Fracchetti?
Aye.
Member Gross?
Aye.
Member Silvershack?
Aye.
Member Gallinson?
Aye.
Member Kohler?
Aye.
President Katzmal?
Aye.
Absent Member Gilmore. Did I get everybody?
Hey.
Okay.
Ooh, bless you. Wow. All right, I think we're up to bus fees. I'm assuming either Larry or Jessica is going to start with going over the sort of presentation details. All right, go ahead and start. I'm going to slip quick to the washroom.
Okay. So I'll start with just the big overview, just a reminder. So our bus transportation costs, as you know, are going up about 38% next year. So we've been out to bid. We only had the same provider. It's a tough market out there. There are bus companies that years ago would have chomped at the bit to expand, and they just are, they're very tentative because they're having a tough time trying to find drivers. So if they can't service the routes, then they have unhappy customers, and you know how that goes. So the 980 registered riders that we have this year, 245 pay the bus fee. Of, is it 325?
325.
And the reason that we have only 245 paying is historically in the district, if you live more than 1.5 miles away, or there's a hazardous crossing as determined by the Illinois Department of Transportation, the board would pick up the portion, the cost, if those kind of issues were there. As we looked at and did our study of fees, we found out that no other Northfield Township School District does that. Anybody who rides pays. So we looked at that concept, and as you know, the board asked us to look at a couple of other things, which included a phase-in, if we're going to do a fee increase and we're going to charge everybody now, and then for families who have multiple children to have a price break in there for that situation. I'm going to let Jessica now take over all the numbers component of this. But are there any questions on kind of the overview? Okay.
So in consideration, as Larry said, of our discussion in January, where we presented several fee schedules, we're proposing a tiered fee structure and phasing it in over 2 years. I haven't included in your board memo, the transmittal here includes a no phase-in model for comparison purposes. So as Larry stated, our bus cost for our regular transportation is increasing 38% next year. We just don't have the coverage for that. The proposal is to charge first riders $450, second riders $350, third riders $250, and the fourth rider, buy three, get fourth free. So what this would do is would keep the board's cost at currently what we're paying out, and then try to recoup that increased payment from all of our riders, falling into a model similar to the other Northfield Township districts that charge all of the riders. Our other counterparts don't have a tiered system. I know it is something we're all talking about. I just got an email this week from one of my colleagues saying, what are you guys charging next year? So this is a discussion at all of the board tables, as we've all received an increase in our fees for next year. The first model that we have presented here is applying 75% of the fee in year 1 and the remainder of the 25% fee in year 2.
Jessica, any
Yes.
chance you can put them up so we can be looking while we're talking?
Sure, let me see.
Well, for everybody, not I can
Yeah.
pull it on my little screen. Yeah. It's for everybody, it's not for me. Yeah.
I'm not there yet though, so hold on.
There we go, there's the grids.
So, so this is the first model that I talked about that had no phase-in, just for comparison purposes. It does include an increase of the board's portion of 3%, as we would expect a normal increase year over year. And what is included in the first student proposal is 3% increases over the course of the contract. But the overall cost is 38% increase, so $1.1 million. So this is what it would look like. It's still a little small. There you go. This is the no phase-in. So the first model would phase in 75% in year 1, so the board is covering 14% of the total cost, the remainder being recouped by fees of the $1.1 million. At a 75% phase in, year 1 would look at like $350 for the first rider, $275 for the second rider, and $200 for the third riders.
Sorry, for the second, third riders, what is the discount per level? What did you base
So
that on?
in the no phase-in model, it's $100
Okay.
per step. But when you break that out, 75, 25%, it breaks down as such.
Okay.
So it's 75.
Okay.
Yep, for year 1. Then for year 2, it would be the remainder 25% plus the increase of the contract of the 3%. So we would look at $464 per rider, first rider $361, and $258. Model 2 looked at 2/3 of the fee in year 1 and 1/3 in year 2. So in scenario model 2, the board is covering 19.34% of the contract increase. Cost for first rider would be $300, second rider $240, third rider $175. And then phasing in for the second year again assumes a 3%, not assumes because the contract will increase by 3%, but then the remaining 1/3 cost to the families, we wind up in the same place in year 2 as we did in the first model. It's just a matter of, do you want 75% in year 1 or 2/3%? We are gathering ridership data. Our preliminary data shows 980 riders registered to use the bus. We are routing all of our routes for 980 riders. Our initial look at ridership for just the junior high shows 180 less riders are actually riding the bus. So this model also, by passing on fee, may make our routes more efficient. We may be able to lessen the number of routes. We will get real user data from it. We did assume a loss of about 10% when we looked at costing out these models. So currently we have 980 total riders, but we're assuming a 10% loss. We also then, in January, we talked about passing on the fee for our young explorers. They ride a smaller bus, have harness, and it is a door-to-door stops for our 3 and 4 years old. 3 and 4-year-olds. So we have proposed passing on the increase for this particular service. It's going to increase by 32% because it's a different bus, it's a different model. From $550 to $725, in whichever phase-in model we would pass through to these riders too. And just our typically developing peers in this program are charged the fee. So only 1/3 of our participants in the Young Explorers are charged a bus fee.
Did we determine how many families have more than one child taking the bus?
Did you have time
Yep.
for that?
Yeah. So I was able to combine 2 data sources. It looks like about 240 that are currently not paying that have multiple children. Another question you had asked about financial assistance, and we will continue to use the federal guidelines for that we use for the free and reduced price lunch program to determine need and assistance.
How we're handling this model compare to what we know about how the high school is handling their segment of the increase? I know there was that article, but I didn't know if we were able to get any more granular detail on that.
So the high school currently, their model is charge 100% of the fee to transport children onto the riders. The board subsidizes no part of their ridership data. What they're struggling right now is how much the board will help to mitigate this increase right now. So their model, I believe, right now they're about $800 per rider
And for
this
every kid.
year. They're expecting a similar increase to us next year as well. So they're looking to see how they can help, how the board will help pitch in for that cost.
Okay, and they're also the ones still working on the evaluation of this versus bringing a fleet in-house.
Yes, we're still partnering with that. That will be at least a year's worth of study before that becomes any sort of possibility.
In the interim, am I understanding right that the other districts that got a different contractor with a different provider? And so, I mean, this year, cost is obviously an issue, especially at the high school, more so than it was here, but the issue also was service-related, and so is the breaking of the Northfield Township districts into different service providers at least going to guarantee one half of this equation is improved next year? Like, what's the outlook for that with the lesser services?
First Student has claimed that they're going to be able to provide better service to us. So currently, our model was 5 of us partnered together to go out to bid for this last 3 years. We did it concurrently this year, but we separated, thinking we'd be able to get more competition if we weren't this 80 bus fleet. We thought maybe our 22 buses would be more appealing if we were individual. 2 of the 5 districts received 2 bids, so they received a competitive bid. Also an increase, not as substantial as an increase as we're looking at. So the bus company that bid the other 2 districts is looking for slow growth. So there's a possibility in the future we might have more competition than we currently have. One of the issues we have with transportation is we look for a provider that has their garage nearby, so that if they need to send buses in and out, that we're not waiting 30 minutes should a bus break down, that the bus barn is
they're coming from
30 miles
Target.
away.
Yeah.
It's with the bid documents, I think we put 10 miles, which is a little broader than we've had in the past, trying to open up that competition as well.
But the other districts are using a different provider. That's what I wanted to make sure. They've gone with someone else. That's a done
2 of
deal.
the 5, yes.
Were there multiple bidders that could have satisfied that range requirement?
All of the bidders would have had to establish a property nearby.
They would have had to have, so none of them currently have it?
Correct. Even the 2 districts that have that received a competitive bid, it was contingent on that bidder being approved for land in Northbrook, which took a little bit of working to get done. Was not a guarantee.
I have a question on something you covered. If you can help me understand a bit better. You looked at, so of the 980 folks that we have signed up for service, you said there's about 90 that don't ride?
We're gathering that data. I don't have all of the ridership data yet from the elementaries. My preliminary data shows of the 200 and something that are registered at the junior high, it's roughly half that are actually riding the buses home. So we'll gather that data. I don't have it in a presentable format to share yet.
Okay. Just a thought. I thought it was great that you included an adjustment downward in number of riders, right? Because it'll reduce the revenue, right? And it was 10% was the reduction. I guess I'm concerned if half the kids in the junior high, are signed up for the bus but aren't taking it. I wonder if the 10% is wildly optimistic.
I think if it's much different the ridership. I think our routes look a lot different. I think the number of buses we have out look a lot different. So I think there's other variables that play with it. There's too many variables to make an assumption at this point. This seemed reasonable with the fee increase first being passed to all and being able, based on a certain set of criteria and assumptions, to help us build a model with this change moving forward.
You have the ability to go ahead and adjust routes if we award the contract?
Yes.
So you still have, okay.
Yep.
Prior to next year?
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you.
We know different for the junior high because of the band program. There are a lot of kids paying for the bus service who are already opting out.
Yep.
3 mornings, at least an afternoon, maybe more if they're doing additional ensembles. And so there is some precedent for thinking that even if people are using it not 100% of the time, that they would still be interested in the service, have it be convenient. So.
I'm just concerned with the shift from it being free.
Oh, I
to-
am too. But
Yeah.
at least we've got some data, different than at the grade school where really they're in or they're out for the most part. Even the upper class ones are only a day or 2 band. It's not as big of an impact. So there's less data to work off of.
And sports are seasonal as well.
Right. Yeah, we the 2 data points we've gathered from the junior high are both in February. I'm looking for another data point as well. I know our first student has ridden some of the buses at the elementaries and found a similar pattern that we're routing buses for many more kids than are actually riding.
Jessica, where does the $350, for example, in the 2-year initial phase-in fit? I know last time we looked at the grid of our comparable Northfield districts and what they charge.
So the current fees between our other 3 Northbrook districts range from $385 per rider to $685 per rider.
And what are they doing for the second kid? I'm still a little concerned about the $825.
They pay $385 or $685 per rider. There is no tiered system.
So even with this increase, we're still below the other Northfield Township
For year 1,
districts
yes.
for year 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then they will likely increase theirs as well because
They are all
yeah.
working on that.
Okay.
Any action on, I know there's a bill at least about the possibility of making this mandated for everybody. I haven't heard anything to suggest that's moving fast enough that we need to put that into the equation right now. Obviously, that would be major land shift for other districts, but.
Right. We're already providing transportation to anybody who wants it. Currently, anybody who's paying is because they're within the 1.5 miles and just need it or want it for whatever reason.
More questions about any of those options? If not, I think we probably need to move to sort of discussion here. Is there a recommendation that you want to promulgate one way or the other on the different scenarios?
Phase in 1 or phase in 2, both in year 2, we wind up at the same spot. It's the matter of how much the board is willing to subsidize the year 1 as we move towards this model. We'll be using fund reserves to help balance the fund with whichever model we choose.
I just say I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. It's a tough decision all the way around. I would favor the first model because it at least makes year 1 look a lot closer to our existing fee structure, just spreading it across more families, right? And whereas the second model does take everybody to a much higher number right off the bat, and a much lower number off the bat, and I think we staying consistent to at least where we are today, just spreading across more riders is the better approach.
I kind of have an opposite opinion just because I feel like this is a big amount of money for some families to absorb, especially, multiple kids. Even though we're going to move it up into the second year, I would favor giving an easier transition in, given that the vast majority of our ridership is currently paying nothing. So, I think that will help kind of transition people a little bit better.
Okay, so can we take no phase-in off the table? It doesn't sound like anybody in particular wants to talk about just no phase-in model. Okay, so really the things that are on the table now are whether we go to, I'm looking at the top line numbers here. whether we go to 350 for the first rider next year, or whether we go to 300 for the first rider next year. I didn't say line 1 or line 2. I just want to make sure that we're all looking at the same ones. Other people had feelings on the.
I think if the board can cover it,
Mhm.
I like the slower phase in. I'm fine with that as long as there are funds to cover it. I think Michelle makes a good point, since the vast majority of riders are paying nothing. You know, we don't utilize the bus, but I'm thinking, you know, next year I'll have 3 kids in the district, and if we did, that would be a significant, you know, something that we would have to budget for that we wouldn't currently be budgeting for.
The difference between those, Jessica, am I looking at this right, that it's 840 versus 879? So we're talking about covering roughly the 40 margin is the difference between 45? Okay. Yeah. Lou?
Just a
Yeah.
quick I'm
No.
sorry, go ahead.
It's okay, we can work our way down. Go ahead.
All right. Hey, so so we're currently, for the folks that are paying us $325. It seems odd, you know, we're increasing our, you know, the expenses going up drastically, and we're worried about, you know, massive difference in the subsidy. Yet we'd be reducing the cost for the folks that are currently paying, and the other significant impact on the folks that aren't paying. Questionable whether or not, you know, how many of those folks are using it, right? But I'm not in love with the idea of going below 325 as a starting point, and it wasn't one of the scenarios you looked at, but I wonder if, you know, I don't know if 350 is the right answer, but I'd be hesitant to drop to 300.
So I just want to put in, there is a late fee if they register past July that makes it 350 right now for riders that come in late. So
with the
it's
discount, it is 350.
Well,
Without
it's
the discount.
325 if you register early. It's 350 if you register.
How
after
often
the
does that
deadline.
happen? How many late
Well, since we've moved to the online registration, the majority of them pay our
Yeah.
325. The other impact is that the riders who are paying that fee are currently paying that per rider, and we are proposing a tiered approach moving forward. It's just another
It's
consideration.
a good point. I mean, so it is, even if we set it at 325 for the first rider, for the folks that are currently paying, if they have multiple kids, it'd be a reduction.
Which I guarantee they won't mind.
No, I don't think folks will, but I'm also concerned because I think I think we're going to see, you know, again, if we're banking on only a 10% reduction in ridership. I think we're going to find that that's going to be that's an optimistic number. And I know you can reroute, but I think it's going to have a significant impact on the revenue.
With either scenario.
Yeah, I do, and that's why I think when we're looking at, I don't know if how responsible I feel if we're reducing the costs, right, while we're seeing a very significant increase in the in the cost of the district.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think also, is the first rider, second rider numbers here that already take the bus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. With the 10% reduction. So it's the 980 spread across the first, second, third. We assumed an even spread of that reduction.
Oh, I was looking at the first rider, second rider, third
Correct.
rider, the number
Yep.
of riders.
Mhm.
So that's not just families who have other children, that's who currently use
Correct.
busing. Okay.
That's based on our current ridership, less that assumption.
I mean, I think considering that we are still lower than all of our districts, you know, it's a tough, it's a tough situation. I mean, I think that people have been appreciative of the free ride and can be, we have to be mindful of the economics going forward. I think we really have to make tough decisions, but this, to at least remain consistent with whether 325 or 350 for that first year. I think we're still being reasonable compared to the districts. Understanding that we feel for the families, and this is a tough position that everyone's found themselves in, but I do feel we have to be responsible.
There we go. Okay. I mean, my instinct is also to do it slower. For the families who've been paying for many, many years, the minority of our families in the district, I'm okay with them getting a small discount in the first year of the ramp up, especially for the families who have 2 kids where that discount is washed out. But I'm also sensitive to the fact that we, I think, need to make a decision tonight, and with 6 board members, that puts us in a 3-3 kind of situation here. Is there any flexibility on, taking a closer look at this, or any other modifications we'd want to look at?
Well, if I can, I just want to add one point. People don't really look at what they don't pay. So I know your belief is, oh, well, they're going to look and say, they were paying $325 and, now I'm paying $300, and why did they get a discount? I don't think people will even recognize that anybody's getting a discount. I think that the people who are getting charged this new charge are going to be more concerned about that. So, we end up in the same place in year 2. And so I think giving people the opportunity in year 1 to absorb this charge, 240 of multiple children in the district. That's a lot. It's a lot of people who are going to be paying a good chunk of money that they were not paying before. So I think, for the little difference that we have in terms of what's the difference in the first year cost between the two, Jessica?
Is it 40 or 45?
About $40,000.
For the $40,000, I would just be in favor of absorbing that and helping people ramp up a little more easily.
And I think, just to clarify, I think that I'm not concerned that people that are the people that haven't been paying would be concerned with it being discounted. I'm more concerned from the district's perspective of, there's an increase in cost. We're trying to go ahead and lessen that impact, right? So more the district's perspective. I'll tell you the other thing, and this looks great, and again, I respect the the work that goes in, but who knows what'll happen with actual numbers if the deficit is worse. Then we aren't. I'd be shocked if we were at this spot in year 2, just because I think that the ridership's going to go down, revenue's going to go down. Hopefully, we can go and reduce expenses significantly. But if we're not successful, then it is a longer. Then it's not. You've got a bigger hole that we'll have to be digging out of in year 2 if that's our goal to get us back to even in year 2. So I'm concerned that we're not going to do as well as the numbers that we're looking at on the page.
Lou, are you saying that you wouldn't support either model?
No,
or you're looking for?
we've got to start somewhere, right? So I think this makes sense, since I think it's going to be a challenge. I don't think it makes sense to go ahead and go backwards on what we're charging families that are currently paying. So I wouldn't go. I wouldn't recommend going below $325. But we have to start somewhere, and I wouldn't suggest going above $350 for the first year, and then we'll end up taking a good hard look at this again next year.
Lou, I would agree with that if it weren't that with the high percentage of riders that don't currently pay. The percentage of paying riders is relatively low, so I think with that in mind, I'm okay starting lower. If we had, if everybody was already paying, I wouldn't want to reduce either, but it's a big shock to go from 0 to several $100s. So that's the issue I take with that. My concern, though, with Model 1, with the lower, or which one is the lower one?
The 350?
The slower phase in. My concern is, Lou, which you mentioned, is that 10%, how accurate that is. And there's no way of knowing. It's an educated,
We had to run numbers. We
right,
ran
right.
based on what we have
So I
today.
understand that. I think that certainly is something that is a risk there. That's my only concern with the slower model.
325 is 72.2% of the 450 we would hope to get to.
I'm looking at numbers on here. I don't want people to, in the picture of our budget, $40,000 is
minimal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this isn't an amount to fret
So
about, but when
in
I look at it on a by-family basis and I see, I mean, I know 3 versus 350 doesn't feel that bad, but for the 242 family, 2-kid families, we're talking about a margin that's more like $85, and for the families that have got the 3 kids, that's the 40-something families, now we're talking about $210, and,
So our fund balance in this fund is, you know, something to keep in mind too. Where, you know, we ended fiscal year end in transportation at 400,000 in that, so 40,000 is more significant to that fund.
yeah. Well, I mean, procedurally, then the question is just if we're stuck in the conversation at this point and we need to kick it for a month, or if we.
Can we just agree on staying with the 325?
At 72%
At
phase in for
72%.
year 1 and 28%. I worry about kicking it further down the road because we are preparing to launch our online registration. And the longer we wait, the longer we have put it down to code the back end for this
Right.
tiering system, which is another challenge we're gonna face behind the scenes.
Is doing another model that's 325, I mean, can we approve that on spec? I know we don't have it in front of us, but.
It would be 72% year 1, remainder year 2.
You have no qualms about us now approving essentially a scenario C that's not on the table?
As long as you're okay with 450 being what the goal is, with the 3% increase for next year, that, I mean, that's a meet in the model, in the middle model.
Okay, team, can we go 6-0 with 325? Do we have a deal?
Yes.
Yeah, I think 325, and then
Yeah.
how, and you'll figure out, what the steps down are for the 2 and 3. You've got nice round numbers now, I don't know if you wanna do that.
Well-
Same thing where it's round numbers, if you're gonna do 100%, I'd
Right.
trust you to make
So-
a good decision if.
Right. So what we're approving is first rider's 450 with a 72% phase in, second rider 350, third rider 250, right? With the 72% phase in for year 1.
No.
Now we're.
No,
No.
we're starting at 325 for the.
So but the 300 and the 350 that you have before you are based on 75% or 67% of $450. So $325 is 72% of $450.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Yes.
So.
And it's all the same for year 2. It was in the
Uh,
first 2
it-
scenarios.
Correct.
And so now nobody will get a discount, but we're going as slow as we can go for everybody else. and-
It just phases it in 72%. That is based on, it's all based on that first model that was phase in 75% or 2/3.
And so we're kicking in an extra 20 from the district, give or take, depending on the ridership numbers. Everybody's comfortable?
Yep.
I have an urge to do all in favor, say aye, but I know we have to poll it, so do we have a, yeah.
It was at 72 or 72 and a half?
It was 72.22222. If
Yeah.
we
So
could just agree on
72.
72% in year 1, the remaining 28% with that 3% in year 2. We end up in the same spot in year 2.
All right, do we have a motion?
Wanted model 1, that
Yeah.
one rider to be 325, not 350. So
Precisely,
whatever that
yeah.
turns out. then that's
Correct.
fine, yes.
But that's based on the phase-in
That's
of the
correct.
proposed fees of
Correct.
450, 350, and 250.
That's
Correct.
correct.
Got it.
So moved.
Thank you, Jen.
What she said.
I'll second that.
All right, Member Gallinson,
Aye.
Member Silvershack,
Aye.
Member Fracchetti.
Aye.
Member Kohler,
Aye.
Member Gross,
Aye.
President Katzmal.
Aye.
Absent Member Gilmore.
All right.
Blame it on Michael.
Can I
Blame it on Michael.
Can I say something about, can I say
No.
something?
Poor Michael has a surgery.
Speaking of
Yeah.
Michael, I know last month he mentioned an education piece to all of this. This is, I think, something that kind of just has to be, whether we like it or not, the increase in this fee.
Yeah.
But what I think we have more control over is preparing, giving families the preparation for this. And
And I
I just
know-
want to make sure that they're aware, that they understand why it happened, how it happened.
Right,
You know.
and I was gonna thank Terry because she did several good write-ups
Yeah.
of this and did push it out, and
I would
think the-
continue to do that, especially
sure.
now that this is.
But I think that the feedback on
certainty.
it was relatively minimal.
Yeah.
Particularly for anybody who's dealt with the high school. I mean, this is still a lovely number compared to what we're dealing with over there. But certainly for anybody who hasn't got gotten to that phase yet.
Mhm.
Just kind of letting them know the state of the world. So, yeah, good reminder. Thank you. Education enrollment report.
So I don't know what happened. I'm not sure what happened at Meadowbrook, but we got 5 new students in January. So that was a lot. Westmore, of course, with the pre-K, they were every day. Right, they have a birthday, turn 3, they can come into the program. So that was +4. Overall, we are +13 over month over month.
Any questions on the enrollment report? If not, we can move on to, this is strategic plan update. Who's covering this?
I am.
Okay.
So, as I put in the memo, I tried to color code this. Several of these you know about. We give you updates, particularly the math at 11 out of 12 board meetings. So the literacy studio,
Can we do it
know.
on the screen too?
Yeah, we can.
Thanks.
Yeah, we'll see how easy this is to read. I'm glad you all have it.
My distance vision is better these days than my reading vision.
Well, and this is, there we go, okay. So you know that we're implementing Amplify and Patterns of Power and the Calkins phonics program in kindergarten. We've had a phonics program for many years. This is just a different phonics program. The social studies implementation is going well. That's a K-8 implementation. Michelle is leading the physical education. That's blue because we're just at the beginning stages of that. And then we're in year 2 of the one-to-one iPad program where we're adding 4 grade levels this year to accompany the other 3. And then we'll add the last 2 next year. Goal 2 is a learning environment. So we're looking at the NB28 STEM lab. I do want to get the Buildings and Grounds Committee together before the next board meeting. We may have a STEM lab update for you, hopefully in March. Kelly has been leading the efforts with the MTSS, multi-tier system of support. And so that's a process that we're using the Swift Education Center from the University of Kansas. We're at the beginning stages of that. This is a more involved process. And then we also have our diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. So we have our 3 meetings on the calendar. We have a teacher administrative group ready to go. And we'll be putting a call out to parents who would like to assist with this. So this is going to be a larger group, not only of parents, but also of staff members. And the concept is that we have a small group that's writing, and then we're going to be asking parents and other staff to give us feedback on that. Work environment is goal 3. So we have many professional development programs that have already been accomplished or are, in process, and that we are using Kristen Clegg as one of our math consultants. We have an incredible summer professional development program. We've brought in recently the ELA Amplify National Trainer. So just trying to do as much as we can. Learning First is headed up by Judy Epke, and Ronit is one of our other instructional coaches. So lots of things going on in technology. Goal 4, family and community connections. I talked at length about all the various things that we've put in place to improve communication. What I didn't include in the opening is we do have the bilingual parent advisory committee. We've had this before, but I think it's nice to highlight that. It is required by law, and Kelly is leading that along with Jasmine, our one of our EL coaches, and what's her other title? Do you remember? Yeah, EL teacher thing. Oh yeah, coach and teacher. She's part-time each. We have shown the Screenagers Next Chapter. That was October 24th. The Northbrook Junior High team has been, their next step that they're looking at is this movie Upstanders, which will involve a parent component also. That's coming April 27th. We're a preview for the fall of 2020. We're looking at a documentary called Angst.
And
then
that was based off of comments from the communications committee, right?
Yeah, one of the things we had them, kind of vote, if you will, on areas they wanted us to look at. And that concept of student anxiety came up pretty high. And then we have a district app that Terry has been working on. We're kind of at the beginning stages, but if all goes well, we hope to have a District 28 app ready to go next year. Our last goal area, resources, number 5, safety and security. We've added the internal and external door locks. We've added cameras. We've done our 4E procedures training for new staff. We continue to collaborate as a township. We hired the Guidepost company to do a safety and security audit of all of our buildings. So what I think the best thing to do with that, because I just got this report on Friday, I haven't even looked at it, the final report yet, is to have the Buildings and Grounds Committee look at that first, and then the goal would be to bring that to the full board in March in closed session. This is one of the areas we can go into closed session to talk about.
Yeah, that sounds appropriate.
And then we have, we're also working in the area of cybersecurity. So if you've watched or know of any news related to school districts, ransomware attacks are on the rise for school districts. So you approved our work with Net 56. We started that in June or July, and we continue to do that. We'll have a more detailed end of the year report on the different things we've been working on. And then lastly, it's this concept of our short and long-term capital improvement project. So we're going to have the Buildings and Grounds Committee look at that again. We already looked at it once this year. We're going to look at it again. We have our summer projects pretty much identified. It's going to be the Meadowbrook HVAC system. It's going to be the STEM work, and we're also looking at doing some work in the FACS, Family and Consumer Science room, to help facilitate the move that we're doing there. That's a really brief update of strategic planning.
Right, so a lot of meat there, so obviously a lot of different areas people might have questions about. Anybody want to put any out there?
I know part of the discussion we were having was sort of measuring progress, that dashboard concept. So I know we have great data in terms of bullet points, but how do we measure, learning first, for example, or otherwise? Are we still working on those metrics?
Yeah, so back in the fall, Michelle and Judy started working on that, and they've been collecting data along the way so that we can, we'll be able to report out on that. Some of them are easy, right? I mean, did we install the door locks and the cameras or not,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Right.
Some of them are much more difficult to kind of tease out, but yes, we've been looking at those items.
I can't make this work. Can we also add, at some point, projected dates as to when we can expect these projects to come to completion?
Sure, to the extent that we know that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually, on the communications list, that's what I was trying to, I wanted to touch base on kind of the timelines for some of those.
I'm sure everyone wants to know when the app is going to be ready. Or the dashboard.
Yeah.
I do have
Can
a
we go back to
quick,
that
I
one
do
for a
have
second,
have a
Larry?
quick update on math, and that is the math committee met yesterday,
Mhm.
and we've gotten to the point where we have selected those resources that we think will be the best fit for us, and so we are, in the next couple of weeks, going to provide an invitation to parents and to board members and to teachers who aren't on the committee to take a look at those kind of finalist resources, so that we are continuing along that anticipated timeline of bringing a recommendation to you by the April board meeting.
Okay. You've anticipated my question. That's why I was wondering if we had soft dates yet for when those forums were going to be. Okay. Can you put the communications list back up again? There was one more thing on there, and I want to make sure I'm... Oh, yeah. I mean, do we have at this point a tentative go-live date for the dashboard?
Do you want to do the update? Yeah.
Right. Everything else is green there. I just was checking on the timelines for the blues to be.
I know you've been
think-
working on it.
Yeah, I think we are, beginning of next school year, I think was the original timeline. There's some of it that's already ready to go. I guess it's a matter of maybe doing another close review to determine if you feel it's complete enough as we work through some of the metrics, like how we measure learning first and how we measure some of that student achievement. Some of the other more concrete sequential stuff has been populated, especially updating the State of 28 report helps greatly. A lot of that data has been I've added to the dashboard. So
I'm wondering, I mean, would a couple board members want to take a look at it and just give some feedback and say, you know, this area looks good, this area, maybe where are we going with that, and just give us feedback with that? Or maybe all of you want to do that. We could do that too.
Can't hurt.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do that.
we can provide them with a link via
Yeah.
email to look at it
Yeah.
independently. Okay.
Are
Yeah.
you waiting, and when you send the email, are you waiting on additional data that you just haven't gotten yet because it's a more manual process to pull it together? I mean, I know you can go and get the park scores and load them in, but.
Yeah, I
Go
think
ahead.
some of the metrics are determining what the metric is in student achievement was some of the the unanswered question at this point.
So, as an example, right? So, if you take map data, that's something that makes sense to do. You know, well, we have lots of map data. We can do aggregate, right, for the district, but then we also have grade level data, and how granular do we want to go? And when you talk about a dashboard, it's getting to the point where there's a lot of information we could put in there, and how heavy do we want this to be, heavy laden with information. And that's one of the things maybe you can give us feedback on, because there are a lot of data points we can pull from.
In terms of more detail about the tentative forums, I don't know if you want to talk about that now or you want to hold that to the bigger discussion of math and minutes and whatnot. So tell me what's better for other content we have to cover tonight. Right.
So that our next step to involve parents in this process is to share the potential resources with them. We think we'll do that at each school, so that parents have an opportunity to be in their own school and
So you mean
hopefully
one at each of
involve-
the 4 buildings? Okay.
Yep, and hopefully involve committee members if they're willing to join us. Otherwise, it will be Michelle and me leading those conversations.
No, it'd be great
So
to have if the teachers
we'll-
are willing and
it'd be great.
available. Yeah.
So we'll
uh-huh.
talk about process, and then we'll talk about our goals and our priorities and why we've made the decision to that point, and then get parent input, especially in terms of how we can support the rollout of parent education and parent making sure that they're part of the supporting their kids at home with
Right.
the new resource.
And the kids did this a little bit differently, right? Because they did more like some demo units as opposed to them being part of like evening forums.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, and I would say, from the standpoint of, what are the components that our committee has looked at, that can be shared, the different aspects that they use to evaluate, whether this is a good program or not, or whether it's a good fit or not for what we're trying to accomplish. So, there's a lot to share with that. So.
Well, and just to recap, because I know a lot of these people weren't at the last meeting, a lot of the reason why this has taken a good amount of time is because the teachers have to go through every single grade level.
Someone's ringtone.
They have the teacher's manual as well as the student book, and then go through and map it to the standards, correct?
So again, we'll share the process at the forums with parents, but in general, there are sort of 3 steps that the committee has taken for each of the resources that we've looked at. The first thing they do is the first step, or using the first tool, which is making sure that the resource is fully aligned to the Illinois learning standards in terms of the content alignment, but also in terms of balance, which is how that content is delivered. The second tool, or the second step, is looking at that resource to determine how well aligned it is with the mathematical practices, which is the way in which we want kids learning math today. And then the third tool, or the third step, is to look at things like equity and access, to look at assessment, to look at resources to support parent and homeschool connections. So all of those pieces, all of those steps have taken place for quite a number of resources. So that has taken time, but we've also taken lots of time to do professional learning along the way, as well as all of our data analysis pieces that the committee has done, understanding current research in math. So it's been a really full and thorough process. We are all eager to make a decision because there's more work for the committee to do. As soon as we make a decision about resources, then it's having input from the teachers to help us to plan professional development for May and through the summer and then through next year, as well as select reporting standards for the elementary for the report cards, as well as any adjustments that we want to make to the resource, because no resource will be perfect. So we will maybe need to do a little tweaking of assessments or whatever it is that we want to do to make it our own.
And just to touch back on what Mara brought up on the bus discussion, the ed piece of this, obviously the communication that'll go out inviting people to the 4 different forums will kind of, have information, set groundwork, but a post-forum kind of documentation for people who aren't available but interested.
Yeah, for sure. We will make that available.
Any other questions on any of the strategic plan 5 elements? No, terrific. Okay. Next up on the agenda, Northfield Township Intergovernmental Agreement for Providing Student Services Programs.
So there's no change to the agreement from what we talked about last time. So we're just at this point asking for approval, and then if you have any clarifying questions, happy to answer that at this time.
We did sort of a first reading of this previously. Are there any lingering questions on authorizing the agreement? If not, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Member Silvershack?
Aye.
Member Gallinson?
Aye.
Member Fracchetti?
Aye.
Member Kohler?
Aye.
Member Gross?
Aye.
President Katzmel?
Aye.
Absent Member Gilmore.
Northfield Township Articulation Update. Larry.
Okay, so the Northfield Township Superintendents met a couple of weeks ago, I believe, and February 7th, maybe more than a couple weeks ago. Dr. Schneider from NSSED, who typically attends, provided us with the update on the financial model. He, according to what I interpreted him to say, is that they're making some good progress on that. So that's very positive and beneficial. We did talk about our United Crisis Emergency Plan. We are planning to meet as a township on a regular basis to talk about safety and security. And then some of these other items, we talked about student truancy, the coronavirus and flu season in general. And then one of our members asked who has early release or late start dates of the various districts.
Questions on the articulation report? I know the report focuses on largely that big meeting, but I think it's important to acknowledge for the whole team how much more you're doing in between the meetings to communicate with both the sister districts and the high school, and to continue to press politely but firmly, for the kinds of communication and transparency we need. So thank you, and that should be acknowledged separate and apart from your work at the meeting.
Sure, thank you.
NBGH master schedule update.
Here we go.
Okay.
Oh, you're getting water.
So is Scott out there? Yep. Did he run away?
To the hot seat.
Yeah, why don't you sit up here?
Yeah, do Michael.
Yeah, you can sit here. By me.
Look, you're scared.
So, Chris and Scott, Michelle, and I will kind of team tackle this issue. All right. So we wanted to start with to make sure everyone understands why we're looking at the math instructional minutes. We're looking at these first three items. If you look at the core math program, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade core, and this fall, the math committee started its work of diving into the standards, trying to find, as they would say, trying to find a home for every standard. And so, there are a lot of standards, and, what we would say is there are too many standards in the typical 40-minute class period. Kind of what compounds that is the single acceleration and the double acceleration for about 50% of our kids. So if you're going to end up in geometry in 8th grade, that means you're taking algebra in 7th, and that means this core 6th, 7th, 8th grade math is being worked out kind of in the 5th, 6th grade area. So we're trying to, with that double acceleration, do 2 years of core in about a year. The single accelerated path is not quite as bad. We've got 3 years to try to do the 2 years. So it compounds the problem for us. Additionally, as we look at the instructional model, when you have a situation where you have too much to teach and you have to get through the content, you do more teacher-centered work. You have to. There's no way around it. But we also know, and our teachers know too, that student-centered work is better instruction, but it requires more time. There's no other way to say that. And then the goal of student-centered learning is you have that deeper understanding, and then it's that retention of the concepts over time. So while we can look at and say, we want higher test scores, really, I think there's a bigger, more important piece to that, and that is, are our kids prepared for the next math course as best they can? No standardized test can test every standard. But when they go to that next math course, we want to have as many of those covered and mastered as we can. So the other thing is, as Chris and the team have been looking, most curriculum materials out there are designed in the area of math anyway for that kind of average 60-minute period. We did look at local school districts to see where do other districts fall in this math minute. So these are about 21 districts. And you can see there are 8 districts up there that are in kind of the 40 to 42, and then one has 47. But then we have this group of 13 that mostly they're 60. They average 60. And then you have some outliers. You got, Winnetka 54, but then you have, Gulf 67 way down at the bottom at 80, and we're currently at 40. We thought that, as we're looking at this, that we should take a look at English language arts also. So we did the same thing with ELA to see how the districts break out that way. So, as you can see, 9 districts are in the range of 60 minutes average a day, with one Winnetka at the lowest at 55 and Lincolnshire Prairie View at 66. And then you have a group that of 12 that are in the 80, 82-ish range. So, you have some balance, but it obviously leans in both scenarios. It leans a little bit on the higher end for both. So this is part of our study, gathering this data and looking at it that way. I want to talk a little bit about a master schedule in general. I think I only have a couple of slides on this. But, we just need to all understand there is no such thing as a perfect master schedule. It doesn't exist. These are very complicated puzzle pieces that we try to put together. Each one, whatever you end up with, has its own unique challenges. It has good parts to it, and it has issues and areas that need to be looked at and addressed. I would say over time, schools get used to whatever it is that they have, and they grow accustomed to it, and they kind of figure it out. But that last bullet point up there says that as you're kind of going through and like, I really don't like this about it, sometimes you can make minor tweaks to address little pieces of the puzzle here and there. All the components are highly interconnected. Trying to pull out one and just say, we're going to deal with this one piece, whatever it is, if it's math or science or gifted education, whatever, and just say, we're going to make all the wonderful changes for this program, it's not going to affect anything else, you can't do it. One change can really send the dominoes down. I look at master schedules as trade-offs. You can't have it all, so you've got to make some decisions about where the trade-offs are going to be. And then no two are alike. They really aren't. Interesting that way.
When you're saying that, you're meaning like from the comparable 20-something that you listed, that you didn't see any identical ones.
Well, it's just because there are so many different components, which I'm going to show you next, that the likelihood that anybody has all of those components exactly the same are almost impossible.
I was just checking, was it a truism or was it actually proven out with the 21? And it sounds like it was in fact proven out with the 21. Yeah.
You'll have some that kind of look alike, but when you peel down below, you're like, oh, they handle this differently. Oh, band, chorus, and orchestra are in the middle of the day, so the kids lose an elective. I mean, it's just all kinds of things like that. So here they are. What are the things that we are paying attention to and looking at? So what is the acceptable amount of time for a course? So it depends on what it is, of course. We would like to say 80 minutes in some cases, and maybe it's 60 in others and 40 in others. But when you start really digging in and looking at and trying to be creative, you can create some of what you want if you're willing to have 39-minute classes or 37-minute classes. And we start having to ask ourselves, what really can we do in 37 minutes? And by the time the kids get settled, it's 35 minutes. And then is that the right decision to make? Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Reasonable class size. We can do certain things if people are comfortable with class sizes of 28 or 29. We don't have that right now. We've, for the most part, I would say, Scott, what are we? Maybe 22, 23, 24, depending. Yeah.
With few exceptions, we generally have 200 kids in a grade level, and we try to run 10 sections. So we're usually in that 20 ballpark. It might get up to 23.
Yeah. But that's a place where if you want to bend to get something else, you can do that. Student cohort sizes, really what I'm trying to say here and what we've learned is that the number of kids in your grade matters. So when we worked with our scheduling expert, one of the concepts that we talked about was a block of 80 kids. So if you think in terms of 80, if you have a junior high that has 80 kids at a grade level, you can do certain things. Or 160 kids at a grade level, because now you got two 80s. or 340 kids at a grade level, because you got 380s, right? But if you have 200 kids, you've got your 280s, and you got a 40 group that's hanging out there. It's like, what do we do with that? What do we do with those 40 kids? How does their schedule, how is their schedule impacted? And the cohort concept says, if we can put, say, 40 sixth graders with 80 seventh graders, no, it would be 40 seventh graders. And I don't mean mixed classes. We're not talking like they're in the same, no, not the same PE class. Just they would have the same set of teachers, but it would be different. It would be a different set of teachers, okay?
Different than the blue-white team.
Different than the blue-white team. We run a very, very clear, crisp breakout that way. But if we want to look at different models, that's something we could look at. Length of the school day, you know, is always an option. We're at 7 hours. Most junior highs are at 7 hours. You can, here or there, you can find somebody who's, 6 hours and 50 minutes, and you can find somebody who's 7 hours and 10 minutes, but for the most part, 7 hours is where our kids are at. The multiple course pathways, so ELA, we have 2 course pathways. Math has 3 or 4, depending on the grade level. World language has 2, I believe. So, I'm sorry? Okay. And then, so what does that mean? I mean, how we delineate the course pathways can open up some opportunities, or it can cause us problems where it becomes more difficult to get kids in the proper course pathway. So some solutions in another area of the schedule might create problems where we say, well, you qualify for advanced French, but we just can't fit you into advanced French because of these other decisions that we've made. So it's just something to consider. I'm not saying we're doing that. I'm just saying there are ramifications when we start making decisions.
There you sound like the high school. There are absolutely kids who are in those sort of scheduling bind votes.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing you're talking about. Okay.
And of course, we want to try to avoid that. Another area is what we would call common plan time for our teachers. Where this benefits kids is in this consistent curriculum implementation, right? Because then we have teachers who can team together, they can plan together, they can problem solve together, but there are models where if we want to change something, some of that gets broken, okay? Amount of cross-grade level teaching. This is where I would call it specialization, right? So right now, our 8th grade science teachers are devoted to 8th grade science in that curriculum. Same with 7th, same with 6th. There are models where we get what we want over here, but now maybe the 8th grade science teacher also teaches half 7th grade, okay? So it's not the end of the world. I mean, it happens in other districts, and it happens all over the place. But we just need to acknowledge that there's some benefit to having the specialization, and is that something we value to the point that we don't want to give it up, right? Band, chorus, and orchestra, so those are at the beginning of the day. I think I mentioned earlier, you could, I don't know what the benefit is other than do you want to start school earlier? We have talked to the band, chorus, and orchestra choir teacher and say, what if we have to start school 10 minutes earlier? How is that going to impact your program? Right now they have a 7:45 start, and the junior high, I think, wraps up at 8:30. Is that right? So they kind of do the 45-minute group rehearsal a couple of days a week. What happens now if we have to start a little 10 minutes earlier because it helps us get where we want to go? Are they going to start at 7:35? Are they going to cut their rehearsal time? Is it going to impact the number of kids who are going to take instrumental music or not? So another, choice that has to be made. 9 is our X block. We do a lot of things in X block, And I didn't want to go into great detail on that, but I did want to highlight, if I can find them real quick. We do some of our interventions, or maybe all of our interventions for math and reading during X block. We have students who receive speech and social work services during X block, which means those are required mandated IEP minutes. If we don't have that, they have to be pulled out of, say, an elective or some other class, maybe an academic class. We are required to teach digital citizenship lessons. I mean, we do have a social emotional learning curriculum. So right now those are in the X block. So if we do away with X block, then we have that's going to have to be taught in, you know, science or social studies, or maybe it's spread out, right? But again, it impacts that instructional time. It's not a clean kind of break. Teachers seek extra help from teachers during X block. There is an opportunity for some of our kids to get started on their homework. Executive functioning kinds of skills can be worked on in X block. And then here's kind of the end of the list. You know, there are models out there where you have different bell schedules depending upon what grade level you're in. And then how does that impact our ability to schedule PE and electives? You know, we were looking at one situation where it just seemed to work wonderfully well until the PE teachers had the end of the 8th grade and the beginning of the 7th grade PE class overlapping 10 minutes. Well, how does that work? It doesn't. You can't do that. So when we start having different bell schedules, the group that's most impacted are the teachers who teach all the grade levels, right? Because now we're trying to fit them into 3 different bell schedules, and it becomes problematic. Availability of teaching space is something we have to consider too. And then we do have this little thing we call tutorial that starts at 8:15 to 8:32. Is that something we need to look at? If we start our day a little earlier, is that something that we can drop and be okay with or not? Okay. So the whole point of this is to say there are lots of things that we can consider. There are some things that, you know, we may completely say are non-starters, like class sizes of 30, you know, may be a non-starter. But this is what makes a master schedule complex to work with.
One other question on the requirements that had crossed my mind. Statutory requirements. Is there anything right now that is minutes regulated, PE being the one that comes to mind?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are there other bounds here that we're stuck with, that were part of the?
So PE is 150 minutes a week.
Okay, there was a lot of discussion about playing with that last legislative cycle, and I remember talking to the legislator saying
it changes often.
Changing even
But
2
it is
minutes would be an
currently
issue.
150 minutes a
So
week.
PE is minutes bounded. Is anything else minutes bounded right now?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah, so right, from a legal or from a legal standpoint, I don't believe so. All right, so thus far, right, what have we done? And we started this process collecting and reviewing our bell schedules, looking at the ELA and math minutes from these 20 schools, right, and trying to look at some of the models that were out there. You know, when you have all these bell schedules, you know, you can't tell a ton about what their priorities are because it's just time, right? So you can't really tell what goes in each slot and what they do with a lot of the component pieces. So, you know, it's good to have, but it's minimal in what we can do. We've had various of us have had conversations with other principals and administrators in other districts, you know, to pick their brains and try to figure out, you know, what's worked in those districts and what, you know, where their challenges are. And then we had our first question was, can we make minor modifications? can we make minor modifications to meet this goal of additional math minutes? And we spent a lot of time. When I say we, I'm really talking about Scott and Michelle and Chris and I, right? Is there a way that we don't have to kind of upend the apple cart and get a 60-minute average time? And you can see up there, I use the word steal, and that's kind of, we looked at, you know, so many different pieces of this to see, can we steal here or there? And then, you know, you can build the clock schedule. The clock schedule will work, but then you start looking at all of those 12 components, and you start sliding groups of kids in, and you start sliding teachers in, and it just starts falling apart in this area and that area. And so we really came to the conclusion after a couple of months of looking at this that we cannot steal our way into this or do a minor modification. It doesn't exist. Okay. We brought in a consultant who would be considered a scheduling guru. Scott, met with him. I was part of some of that, as was Michelle. Chris was part of some of that also. And he got us to the point where we had, you know, maybe 3 or 4 examples of things that we could begin to work with and build out a little bit. So we started trying to figure out a build out and putting something together that people meaning the staff, could look at. But until we, you know, really put our minds to trying to build something out, it was nothing but a schedule of, you know, time clock, which is not enough. And then we started talking to the faculty. So I do understand, you know, some of our faculty spoke earlier, and I do understand the feeling that, you know, it's rushed. From our perspective, we were trying to get to the point of doing this without impacting the master schedule in such a way that it upends certain pieces. And so we did put a lot of upfront time into doing that, with the hopes of actually finding, right, that nugget that we could make it work. And so I do understand why it may feel like it's rushed from your perspective. I completely get it. And so, but we are at the point where we do need to, and have brought you in because we're to the point where we need that feedback. So I do understand your point. So here's, before we kind of jump into Scott, you know, this is kind of my summation is, so we can develop a workable schedule. It is possible. But we all need to know it's not going to be a perfect schedule because they don't exist. And we also need to remember that if we end up with something different, that it can be modified and improved upon, you know, over the years, just as the current schedule we have has been modified here and there, as we try to figure out what works best for kids and what works best for learning teams and things of that nature. So it's a process. You don't pick a master schedule and then you're done with it. You know, and if we can, I guess now look at, Scott, some of the examples so that at least the board knows kind of what we've been trying to play with.
What we've been doing. I feel like since I was sitting in the back, I feel like I should talk loudly because it is hard to hear back there. But Ramsden, will you tell me if I'm talking too loudly here? Larry's going to pull up our current schedule just to kind of give people an idea. We talk about this with our staff too, is just to understand this concept of cohorts. When he scrolls that up a little bit, if we just can look at, like, let's just look at one grade and look at that far left column and look at 6th grade. That's our current 6th grade schedule. And the color scheme really, the yellow are core classes. You see the little blue lunch. I think that's gray. I'm color deficient, so that X block there. But then at the bottom, there's a couple orange. Our sixth graders end the day with PE and electives. So what I want to focus on is those six, those first four, and then after lunch, the two, there's 6 yellow core periods. Those are 40-minute periods. That's 240 minutes. So that's kind of what we're looking at, what we're working with. And that currently consists of a block of ELA for 2 of those. You've got your science and social studies, and then you've got world language and math. Those are your 6. And if essentially, when we start looking at some of these model, and that has an X block, it has our 100 kids per team in 6th grade, 7th grade. We could do that at 8th grade. Well, we're pretty clean in that sense. 100 kids here, 100 kids here. They've got these 5 core subjects or 5 teachers, 20 at a, in a class. It's pretty clean. And like Larry alluded to before, 7th grade, 2 7th grade science, 2 6th grade social studies, clean in that nature. If all of a sudden we want to say, well, we want to have a double period of math, we're still looking at those 6 yellow. And essentially we're now saying, okay, now let's say world language is going to get bumped out of there. So now we have 2 ELA, we have 2 math, we have a science and a social studies. But now that world language gets bumped out. And one of the questions would be, okay, does a little bit of tutorial and the 30 minutes of X block, and now does that find a home for world language? Well, world language could get pushed out to this PE electives world, which you might say, what does that mean? Well, just like our PE and elective teachers teach all 3 grade levels, then we would need world language to be of that nature as well, where people are teaching 6, 7, 8. And they're off. It's still a core academic full year class, but it gets pushed over into kind of this other PE elective, the orange up there essentially. That's one way to do that. If you wanted to keep X block, then what ends up happening is those 40-minute periods.
Do you want, I'm sorry, do you want these yet or not?
Yeah, I think, so what we're looking at is that top left box there, A, and I was kind of leading into B. You see there that instead of 40 minutes, maybe it's 39 minutes. You see the double block of ELA, roughly 400 minutes. Math is almost 400 minutes. And then science, social studies, world language, all the other classes essentially are like 39 minutes a day for the 5 days. There's a good chance you would lose that ability to block in the PE elective world language world because now we're part of this triad and no longer paired up like we currently are. But it doesn't mean that you couldn't still do that in science and social studies. Math and ELA would already be blocked each day. If we wanted to keep X block because we felt like that has value, we need that for a variety of reasons. What you end up doing is kind of snipping away a couple minutes at each period to kind of get those 25 or 30 minutes back. So this is what Larry referred to earlier, is your 39 minutes becomes maybe 37. Your blocks now become 74 instead of 78 or 80. And then it's just when is it you hit that threshold of 37's too low, So that's essentially A and B there. It would, the part that is really hard to wrap your mind around, not you specifically, but in general, is this concept of cohorts, because we added another group in here. So now are we saying that we have those same 100 kids now for 6 teachers, 2 ELA, 2 math, a science and social studies, and we're really reducing our class size? Or are we now saying now 6 teachers times 20, now we have cohorts of 120 kids? So if you do that, then it looks like you'd have 5 cohorts in the building, which means you're going to have a couple that are these cross-grade 80 6th graders and 40 7th graders. And as Larry alluded to, that doesn't mean that we're going to mix them in math class. But what it means is these 6 teachers are teaching these 6 sections, and 4 of those sections are 6th grade and 2 of them are 7th. Or 2 of them are 8th and 4 of them are 7th. You kind of get these hybrid cohorts. What gets really tricky that we found when we were trying to do some of the planning is if you've got kids in this group, what do you do about something like lunch? And are we going to start creating some split classes among things? It's just some of the nuances. We could talk for hours, but at this time of the day or night, I don't think we want to. We're trying to just give you a big picture. If we slide over, Larry, to example C, this is more where you could keep your yellow, for lack of a better term, your colors on there intact. But now when we're looking, let's just stay in that far left column in the 4 yellow and then lunch and the 2 yellow. What we would now do is look at these in triads. There would be a group of 3 and another group of 3. And the reason why now we're looking at these in 120-minute blocks, and a 120-minute block would be ELA and math, who we could alternate in 80-40 every other day. And then the other 3 would be science, social studies, and world language, which would be 40-minute classes. But the pairing of the 120, ELA and math would have to be paired together in 3-period little chunks of time. You may have a split over a lunch or split over an X block, but in general, that would give them essentially 60 minutes a day. But what it really would be is alternating 80s and 40s for ELA and math. Science, social studies, world language sticks with their 40 minutes a day. Again, it would probably make it a little more difficult for them to block because now they're in this triple. And you're not going to have a 120-minute class. You could possibly get creative, but for now, that's what that would look like. That would maintain X block. It would maintain the bell schedule and everything of that nature. And it would maintain essentially your cohorts of 100 kids on each of those teams. If we want to move to the bottom left, example D. This, if you look at the minutes, it becomes more consistent. Now we're 60 minutes a day for science, for social studies, for math, for ELA. Some nearby schools have this model as well. Now, going back to what Larry talked about, these cohorts, you're looking at these 4 core teachers. 4, sorry, it is late. You have science, social studies, ELA, and math. And so that 4-person cohort probably has a cohort of 80. So again, when we're a building of 200, you've got 80, 80, and then you're probably going to get caught somewhere where you've got 40 and 40, which is what it is. I mean, you could say that's no big deal. You could say that's a really tough thing. As a scheduler, for me, if Pam Mendelsohn is teaching 2 sections of 8th grade and 2 sections of 7th grade, it's can I commit to having her have additional plan time with both Costello and Stout and Fry and Paul. And it's an additional prep for her. But in terms of kids, again, there would not be hybrid courses in science like 7, 8 together. It's just that she would have a couple 7th and a couple 8th. In this one, if we had no X block, just questions of everything that goes on during X block, what happens there to, drama programs or student council or mentor programs and things of that nature, interventions or SEL. In this model, again, world language gets kicked out to the 3rd orange. And I say kicked out, I don't mean that in any disparaging way. It just now is no longer on that 4-person team. They're rotating through 6th, 7th, 8th in Spanish. We only have 1 French teacher. I mean, she would still teach all of the French grade level sections. And then the last one, example E, is essentially that same concept, but you kept X block. So then again, where do those minutes come from? Your 60s become 57 for your core content areas. I should mention in both of these, it's probably hard to read that bullet point. In these, what happens because of the nuances of trying to avoid splits in classes, there are lunches that almost become brunches. We know in a nearby school district that has these, and it's kind of a sticking point for them. Their lunch is even earlier, but in one of these, the first lunch could be at 10:45. If you did the X block one, it could even be at 10:30.
That's like the olden days of GBN.
Maybe.
That's the olden days of GBN. It's the
Yeah.
11:13 lunch. It's the people who are eating lunch at
And
10:15.
Tracy, you bring up GBN, and I think what's helpful to know about that is because they're a block schedule, for if you have kids there or you had kids there, they've got their 2-3 block, their 4-5 block, their 6-7 block, and their 8-9 block. And it kind of works. If you stole minutes and added another period, because sometimes people say, why don't you just do this and add a period? You just kind of unblock things, or you've got a class kind of hanging out there, and it doesn't work as well if that's something you want to do, if blocking is something that you want to do. The other thing that where middle school is different from high school is your freshman this could be why they have late starts and things. But where we want Pam and her 7th grade team to be able to have this common plan time, talk about kids, talk about curriculum, do a lot of things together, is, you know, at the high school level, you have multiple people teaching bio or chem, and it's not like in their off period, they're all off together and they're all talking about their sophomore chemistry class. But that's probably late start and other professional development. So they're allowed to smatter classes anywhere, and we're trying to keep it where our 7th graders during 1st and 2nd period are going off to PE electives so that our 7th grade teachers can then plan together. Just one of those things about middle school. And we try to do that, I think, at the elementary level as well. And then
How many days a week do you have to block in the current schedule?
we currently block on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And then the Monday, Thursday, Friday is our 10-period day. And with all of these, again, Larry alluded to the start time. Could you get rid of tutorial and start at 8:25? Possibly, with consequences, good and bad. But then it's like, what did it gain you? Like that 10 minutes, how can you repurpose it? Do you have to pair it with something else to actually make it substantive? And the last thing I'll say on that bottom one is we talked about cohorts of 75 or 95. The other thing is numbers matter significantly. When people say, why don't you do what Maple does or what Shepherd does or what these do? And when you have 130 or you have 170 or you have 240, it really matters because you can think about 6 or you can think about 4, you can think about 5, like how many classes and teachers are you grouping for? So that's where currently we're very, very clean, 200 in general. What's unique about us right now is we've got a 7th grade class. It's one of the lowest we've had, smallest we've had in a while, in this low 190s. But we've got little brother coming right behind him that's at 223. And a couple years down the road, we've already got some, you know, current 3rd and 4th grade that are 208 and 217 and things. So that varies. You know, you could have classes of 24 and classes of 19. So just things that we're thinking about. And I probably have talked already too much. I can
Do
end
any
it.
of these examples have any blocks worked into them?
I'm sorry, have any what?
Blocking.
Oh, blocking, okay.
Yeah.
Well, one thing is when you have, I guess they all do to a certain extent. If you have 60-minute classes, I don't think there's a block because I don't think we're looking at 120. So I think that is your block of time. If you're thinking of pairing,
No, I'm thinking more of, you know, because the Tuesday and Wednesday blocks means that they don't have all their classes.
they have half, correct.
On those days.
Except for LA.
And
right.
I'm asking the question because I know a lot of what X block, kids like to use X block for is homework. And if you don't have all of your classes every single day, it provides some cushion, you know, in terms of when things are due. I mean, that's the nice thing about the high school schedule,
Mhm.
right? Like you don't have everything every single night. And so I'm just trying to figure out, of these, are any of these using blocking? I know example C isn't, but are any of the other ones?
Yeah, and just know that when you block, you got to have a partner to bring to the dance. And then some of these, like we had talked about, that's what gets left out. In the initial one where you have 2 math and 2 ELA and you have science and social studies, they're all paired up. They could block every day, every other day, however you want to do that. Then when you get into that orange, what we ended up doing is we now have a triad. We've got PE electives and world language. So that's what makes it difficult for them. If you think about it, that's why I referenced GBN schedule, because they've got 4 blocks, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9. So it works really, really well. If you throw in this like 10th period or another period, they just can't block. It would have to be each day 40 minutes. But could we? Yeah, we could right now. We could block.
Part of the reason I'm asking is, we're looking to kind of find time. And, I guess I'm still trying to understand more what X block is used for. I know that my kids specifically told me X block is great because it's the only time you have all day to get a jump on your homework. And he often had a lot of junior high school homework. So if we're blocking, then, you know, that alleviates some of the pressure for having that X block portion, right? Am I understanding this right?
Yeah, I've heard high school kids talk about that's one of the nice things about high school is, in theory, you only have the most homework you're going to get is from half your classes, or you have 2 days to complete it. I've also heard people say that, like, boy, 90 minutes is a long time. And the other thing about that is we do have 11-year-olds now they're kind of turning 12, but when you have 11-year-olds, 80, 90 minutes can be a really long time. I will own the fact that there are staff members in our building that have been pushing me for a long time, pushing us to go to a full block. And I'll admit that I've been one of the somewhat resistors because I worry about 11 and 12-year-olds. And I think about things like world language and math, where the thought of having it twice a week for some of these kids and that lack of continuity or repetition and routines always made me nervous. I think I've softened a bit on that a little bit over time. But I also need, the discussion about is 80 minutes kind of too long for all of the subjects. But I think our staff has done a nice job over the last 7 years adjusting to that and appreciating what 80 minutes gives them, but also understanding that 40 minutes sometimes works as well.
I'm thinking of this as a teacher myself. When I was teaching in Chicago, I remember when we got a new principal, and the new principal came in. He was fabulous, but he came in and he sat down all the teachers, and he said, you've been here for a long time. I'm new. What would you die on a hill for? What do you hold sacred? And, and we listed them out, and he didn't give them all to us. But I thought that was really an important thing to do when you're making a really big change. I would like to hear from the teachers who are in the trenches, who are actually doing this. What would they die on a hill for with their current schedule, or when it comes to a new schedule? Is X block, do they feel like that is, would they die on a hill for X block? Would they die on a hill for 80 minutes or 70 minutes or whatever of ELA or whatnot? But I think that's the part that's missing for me. I want to hear from those that are in it.
Just let me so I agree with you. We started that, but people need time, I think, to process things. So part of what we're planning on doing is going back to the faculty now that they've had time to kind of think through this, because we did this, on a Friday, and it was kind of, here are some of the concepts, give us your initial thoughts, right? Which is fine. It's just, but it's not fine if that's it, right? So I agree with you, and then part of our next step is to go back to the faculty and talk about and ask about that. So I don't know what you would ask.
Yeah, I don't want to sound cliche, but I think you heard, a lot of people are here tonight. I think the start is they die on a hill for their students and for each other.
Certainly.
They're very, very committed to this place, and I think that's why we saw such passion and emotion recently, is because this is, for some it's been a year, and for some it's been 33 years, and this is, their home, and they've taught next to this person, for 15, 18 years. That being said, we did ask for those priorities, and certainly some of those, when we think of the orange time there, again, not to keep using Pam, but for her to be able, you're just closest to me, all right? Is that, for her to be able to collaborate with her 7th grade colleagues and her 7th grade science learning team, I think is a really important aspect of that. We carve out department time and staff time and, and other times, but I think that's a critical piece of it. And I think people also appreciate the fact that you can, if you're devoted to a certain content area, we do have, math teaches multiple subjects at times in world language. But in general, if I can really, really focus on 6th grade social studies and do a bang-up job, that certainly is, you can devote your time, energy to that. In terms of X block, it just really varies. I know Michelle had talked about from the student perspective, because students, I think, would be very, very upset. But I think that's it initially, right? Because if I use that time well, that's my time, that kid time that you're taking away. And from a social emotional well-being perspective, if you go through a kid's schedule, you'd be exhausted by the end of the day. That is kind of one of these decompression times. It's SRT, it's whatever you want to call it. But there are times that there's student council meetings, and David Downing and I have an 8th grade student mentor meeting with 6th grade, and we do have IEP minutes, and we have drama groups in foundational classrooms, and there are other times that we have through Spirit Week competitions, and there are things that you could we find other times or other ways. Another creative thing is, what if you had it 2 days a week? Is it something of that nature? I talked to a principal just, these days run together yesterday, talking about instead of having their SEL once a week, they do a larger thing once a month and more of a all school thing, assembly, and they have those dates so that you don't have to earmark that. But I think that X block is something that we've been accustomed to. But again, is it a hill to die on? For some, yes, and for others, maybe not.
I want to talk a little bit about the structure of this conversation, because I think we could easily sort of devolve into just sort of a million tangents here. Business-wise, what do we need to accomplish tonight, and what more do we need to learn from the 4 of you guys about where you are in the process, what your preferences are among these different programs, and kind of if you have 1 or 2 favorites rising above, so that to the extent we're going to ask questions, I want to try and focus on kind of where you guys really are, and more than we're a little bit theory-ish right now. So is that helpful to you guys?
Yeah, for me, for me, it's not about preferences, because they all have their pros and cons. For me, as the scheduler, to me, it's again, trying to keep our staff involved and get feedback. If there are decisions to be made, and I'm sure they need to be made in the somewhat near future, like, I have to be the one to make sure it works on the board. I have to make sure that there are pathways for kids in advanced and in core, in REI classes. And, if we're going to pair classes, I need to know that. But there's certainly other pieces of it, too, is thinking about teacher work schedules. And, yeah, there are a ton of factors.
All right, so you're saying from your kind of gatekeeper role here, master of the minutes, all of these are workable. They all have pros and cons. But there's nothing here that you want to say.
I
don't be
like to
serious
think they're all
about.
workable. I have
Okay.
not worked my magic. I know that, again, there are other principals that I've communicated with that run these schedules. And again, they have different numbers, and some don't have honors world language, and some do. And so, there are different factors. So it's a matter of getting my hands dirty and figuring it out.
Okay.
So our goal tonight was, not to present one. It was really to make sure that, you all were up to speed on, like, what's involved in this. Like, this is a very complicated process, and we are going through, trying to work and find a solution that's workable, right? Okay. So our next step is we got to go back to the faculty and then keep, like, drudging, and I say that's not the right word. I mean, it feels like drudgery when you're, going through all of these components and trying to figure out, where it begins to fall apart, because, things on the surface, it looks like it's going to work, like Scott said, but he's got to make the board work, and that's where, the challenge comes in. So, the other thing is, we're going to know more at the March board meeting. And that's all I can tell you. I don't know what that means. All I know is we're going to know more. So.
Okay, there have been other meetings this week, though, where there was more conversation about certain scenarios. And so I want to understand if we're now sort of like there's 4 all kind of equally on the table. Is that where we're at?
I don't know if we can say that. I think there's just so many nuances that there's more exploration that we have to do with these. There was, so after we met with the faculty on the Friday, we came back the following Wednesday at the faculty meeting and we started talking about one of the models more than the others. So that's fair to say.
Okay.
And that was what we would call that the I don't know, I call it the 40-80 block for math and ELA. And that's where it's an average of 60 minutes over the course, you know, if you think of it as a 2-week period of time, you're averaging 60 minutes a day. So that's kind of where we want to be with math. But the downside is the ELA component, you know, we move from 80 to 60.
And which
average.
example letter is that? That fits within?
Which
huh?
one, Scott?
A or C?
No, it's A.
It's A?
It's,
Hold on, let me look.
but A.
C, C, you're right, you're right, C.
Okay, that's what I thought too. I was confused. Okay, okay, I'm
Right.
tracking.
So
Yeah.
we started, you know, working a little bit with that to see
Okay. Mhm.
where that might take us. But, you know, I met with all the LA and math departments at each of the grade levels just to say, no decisions have been made. You know, we're still trying to work through this. We need to get more feedback. You know, we need to keep kind of churning through all of these components and see if we can come up with something that's workable. Like I said, there's no perfect schedule, and if we want to change math time, if we want to increase that, there has to be an offset. There has to be an adjustment somewhere to make it work. So we can't just keep everything that we have and create this 60 minutes from math, because you know, I think what we've tried to explain is you can't have 40 and 60 and 80. It doesn't work. The overlap becomes impossible to manage.
So with that, I risk of getting off on a tangent, right? So you say, you know, if we're looking for 60 minutes at math, you know, at some point, you know, you guys are going to give us a recommendation on this is what we want to have for math. So hypothetically, if it's 60 minutes average for math, and if it's 60 minutes for LA, right? It's pretty easy to see the upside on math, right? It's more minutes for math. I think it's important to understand also what the downsides are on LA, and so I think that's important as well, as we look to the future. I don't know. So you've chatted with the folks in LA. So I'll be interested to hear about that as that develops. Not
Yeah.
for tonight, but I think that's really a super important component. One other component, chatted briefly. If there's a financial component, you know, short range, long range, you know, how it impacts staffing. If there's an increase in staffing, maybe not a big deal if it's short term, but you know, maybe we have a feel for that as well as we you know, down the road.
Yeah, and I also referenced, you know, did I reference the demographic study here? Yeah. Okay.
Not in this one, did it? In this meeting?
Earlier.
Oh.
Yeah, so I lose track of where I talk about these things, right?
Mhm.
So,
So state of the,
so
state
are
of the
we moving to 650 or 675 or 700, which is going to require more staff anyway?
Yep.
And when would that happen? So all of that, you know, we can't, I guess what we need to do, and I know Jessica's working with the demographer, so I'm interested to see that as a component of this, to see, like, when are we expecting that? I mean, is that 5 years down the road, or is that 2 years down the road? Is that 3? That actually is something that we need to consider if the demographer thinks it's going to happen sooner rather than later, too. So that would impact our discussion on staffing.
I would just add to what Lou said. I think he's spot on. If whatever you ultimately recommend to us, whatever the change is, obviously somebody's going to get time taken away from them, some or multiple subjects. I want to understand the curriculum impacts of that, and then, you know, depending on what the curriculum impacts are, you know, what are we losing there, and how are we going to account for it? Because I don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul and then just end up with a problem with Peter. So, you know, I think if we have that kind of understanding, and especially as we have a particular schedule that we go through looking at curriculum and making changes. We have a cycle. If you take 25% of the time away from language arts, does that bump it up in the cycle? You know, what do you do with that? So, and then the one other thing I would say is, you know, all of this stuff is going to take time to kind of settle in and everything, but, you know, what are we looking at to see if this is a good change or not? And if it's not, then what are we doing? So.
So at this point, are we saying, I mean, I get it's got to sort of distinguishing the gatekeeper role, but are all the other three administrators who are involved in this analysis also saying they're sort of reserving judgment on a preference amongst the options for now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Given that, yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty uniform, but I think we're hearing from all the board members that when we get to this next phase, it is essential that there is a recommendation here. This isn't like, you know, are we subsidizing 40 or 20 of $1,000? I mean, this is something where we do need, you know, kind of a thorough recommendation from the administrative team. I would ask two other things be kept in mind in getting to that process. You know, one is going to sort of be the parent impact of this. You know, where my gut is there is a scenario that stands out as being most likely to be sort of parent palatable, but to look at the data that speaks to that. There's also, I mean, magnet is the word that keeps coming to mind for me, that there are some scenarios here that almost have a magnety feel. Like we know some of the schools, when you looked at the English, math, or other data we've talked about, almost have a mini magnet kind of feel where they've singled out a subject or two at a more drastic expense of others. The surveying that we did at sort of the outset of this didn't really show a taste for that. It showed sort of representative value for both English and math and other subjects as being important or the most core. And so to be cognizant of that concept as we're working through this, that weighting is something that we have parent input on, and to be careful of models that have a sort of magnety feel a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know
Those
what
were
you're
the
talking
couple
about.
things I was kind of thinking about in my head. Are there other pieces that people want kind of at the forefront while they're working towards a clean recommendation?
And if we're looking at this for
Yeah.
next month, the other piece, and this follows on what Michelle said.
Mhm.
You know, so if we're gonna, if the recommendation is taken instead of a LA, there are gonna be impacts on curriculum, and is it like some, you know, reassurance that there's enough time to go ahead and pull that together? So there were some comments earlier about, you know, that this doesn't want to be hasty. We just need to make sure that it's pretty complex, right? And the impact on the whatever we're taking the minutes from, stealing the minutes from, make sure that we have time for that.
Other board member questions or comments? In terms of coming back next month, this isn't a true action item in the sense of it's something where we have a statutory need to bless it so much as it falls into the category of kind of major district initiatives. You know, and in terms of the sort of guidance and measures and things we've talked about surrounding those to front that, you know, as we go into the next presentation.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Scott is out of the hot seat, but he can stay if he wants. Buildings and grounds was the next agenda item. You're all good. Go ahead. Can we, Terry, can we, Mark,
About 20 minutes of material.
Terry, can we note Jen excused at 10:47? She's got to go childcare. And I can see people are trickling out, and I don't remember if I mentioned this at the beginning, but both Michelle and I and Michael, who are out for medical reasons tonight, will go back and watch that first 45 minutes to make sure that we've caught up on the content from the beginning. All right, are we good for buildings and grounds? Anybody else need a little pause, or?
Yeah, for buildings grounds, I don't think there's anything that we have to report out this month. We'll have to set a meeting for sometime before the next board meeting.
Procedurally, I know you mentioned talking about the security report, so Buildings and Grounds is a formal committee. It will be a notice meeting, but it will also then have a closed section.
Yeah, I was
to
thinking that
accommodate,
we'll
yeah.
have to, yep.
was ringing the same bell for me.
Yeah.
All right,
So
great.
When you send out the notice?
Legislation, still very early in the session to talk about anything predictively, and so I think we can probably table that. Second policy reading, oh, but we lost Jen. Mara.
But there's no we don't need.
I
to-
know,
Yeah.
but someone
Okay.
has to officiate that. So Mara, for the policy committee.
There's, I don't know, I mean, we covered, Jen so beautifully covered everything last month. We just need to approve it, is that it?
Were there any odds and ends we were cleaning up?
Well, Michelle had just sent some like spaces and different.
Yeah, it like
things like that,
typos.
so-
Oh, okay.
So that was,
Yeah,
that's easy.
totally
Renee can do
minor
that.
Yeah,
but,
nothing else,
yeah.
right?
Nothing else.
Nothing
No.
content-wise.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, these were all ones that were press recommendations
Right.
from ISBE and went through committee and council, so we're
Yeah.
all good then.
We
All
made
right.
that, we made that revision on the dollar amount. That was, I think, I didn't.
The
vote.
reserves, I think, was a past cycle even. Was it this one or was it this
really?
one?
Oh, I thought this was the,
We broke it up into, yeah.
We did 2 blocks
Right.
because it was such a big
Oh,
press
okay,
packet,
thank
but
God.
we
And there's
decided
another
to be
one
even
coming.
more aggressive
No, but
on
you're
that
talking
one
about the
point.
12,000.
yeah, I
Yeah,
thought
it's
that it was this round, but.
No, it is. It is.
Oh,
It's in
I'm
this
thinking
packet.
of the
that was- I
reserves
didn't,
thing. You're
I
right.
didn't note, I didn't see it.
'Cause we
so I
want-
assume it was unredlined.
We wanted to go back to 25,000.
We were being more
Yes.
more
I
conservative.
took it down to 5. No,
Yeah.
I didn't.
Perfect.
No. It said 25. We made the switch. It's
Okay.
back to the original amount. Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Got it. All right. Do we have a motion to approve the policy? First and second reading. Thank you, Tony.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Member Fratelli.
Aye.
Member Gross.
Aye.
Member Silvershack.
Aye.
Member Gallinson. Oh, sorry. Member Kohler.
Aye.
President Katzmal.
Aye.
And absent members Gilmore and Gallinson.
Terrific. NSSED in Michael's absence, I don't know if we have a report on that.
No, you have the board briefs
I
in
have
there.
a quick question. So when do we expect that we're going to hear about their new financial model? Was there an indication? Sounds like they've got something, but when's that going to be sent out?
I do not know yet. Yeah. I don't know if Michael, do you know?
I do believe they started the process with the intent of having it in place for next year. I do know they have moved it to 21-22, I believe was the last update I received through my officials.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on NSSED? If not, Terry, communications.
Okay, just a few things. First off, the 5 essential survey closed on the 14th, and we did reach all the thresholds at our schools to receive the parent report, with response rates between 28% and 42%. Also, our student response rates are between 95 and 100, and our teacher response rates were between 75 and 83. So we should have pretty good reports that represent the opinions of the school. It was interesting to hear some of the questions tonight about what is Literacy Studio and why don't we teach grammar and how come writing goes with reading, and we're hoping that we answered some of those questions, starting with the publication of a series of videos. We published the first one and sent it out to parents on Friday, talking about this theory, and we'll have 4 parts that are currently published on our website under programs, under Literacy Studio, and we'll be sharing those also on social media. We're getting some pretty good response rates, definitely more from posting them on social media than through the newsletter. But we're going to make sure we put it out there as many ways as we can.
Was it in the Friday newsletter? Is that
Yeah.
what you mean?
I didn't see it.
No, I only caught it on social media. Was it
Yeah,
like
it
a
was there.
story and you had to click in? Try doing
No,
it
it
as
was,
an embedded
it was under
image or
district
something.
news.
Okay.
It was there, embedded. The video was embedded. But it wasn't in the junior high.
Aha,
That's why,
okay.
because it's K5.
We don't get the K5 anymore.
Right. So
All
that's
right,
why it is.
I know.
The junior high are still to come. We're finishing those. We have 2 almost done, and we're polishing up those.
So you need the link, is that what
You know, I actually saw it on social media, but I don't know that all of the board members are.
So maybe
You can
just send the
find
link.
it under programs, yeah. And on our website under programs, there's a page called Literacy Studio.
I started
where
to
they
watch
are
the one with
prominently
Andy, yeah.
displayed.
Mhm.
Okay.
You found
And
it?
I watched it, and I thought I watched it from social media, but I watched it on the link, yes.
Okay.
Got it.
Awesome. So, thank you. Thanks to Chris for all her hard work in helping us telegraph the important points. Our Communications Advisory Committee, as we mentioned before, very quickly, we are putting together a fourth meeting. I think we spent a lot of that previous meeting getting feedback on the different communication tools that we have put into effect. We had them look at the strategic dashboard, as well as looking at some of our analytics. The analytics is what I wanted to share with you. When we shared these at the Communications Advisory Committee, we were just representing or showing how many viewers we got, and that we actually were surprised by the high number of viewers that we had. As you can see, we had 406 unique viewers in November, 94 in December, understandable, and 104 in January. And we're seeing average watch times that range from 5 to 10 minutes, so I think that people are looking for what they want. They may not necessarily be watching during the streaming, but they do look up the archive piece, which we add the closed caption to. Part of the discussion is ways to improve that, and some of the feedback I got was to perhaps note minute markers in the board briefs of where it is on the video, which
idea.
it would be pretty time consuming, but we'll figure out if we can at least do, like, for example, the main issues tonight, we might be able to add those. And then the second thing would be to add these presentations within the video of the PowerPoints and the slides, which again, we're balancing resources versus, how many people see it, and I think that's what we were trying to ask about, so.
You would edit it in somehow?
Yeah, we could edit it in. So it'd be an after the fact, it wouldn't be during the live stream, it would be in the archive version.
Well, you have these on YouTube, don't you?
Yes.
I think in YouTube you can insert something just
Exactly.
in the video frame that says, look at the link below or something, and just link them below.
Okay.
And
I'll
then
look
you
at
don't
that.
have to
really put them in there.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that,
Could we have
thanks.
a- I mean,
Thanks for
could
that.
we have Ramson do something with the camera, right, where we do the camera on the TV?
We
I don't
talked
know- you
about
know
that.
what?
It's kind
I
of
don't
tough
think you can
because of
see
the
it, yeah.
because the angle. Because then he has
You
to
need
like
a board to
turn it
switch
in,
angles to do
refocus.
it.
Yeah, then we need two cameras. We need a director's booth.
And
we
I
need
think
a
it's
you know.
hard enough for,
We'll
it's hard
move to
enough
the
for us
GBN
to see it
broadcasting
here,
studio.
you know?
Yeah. So we're working within our means to make it at least reasonable and a little more useful.
Forgive me, because we weren't here. We were at the concert earlier, but I'm hoping we touched on earlier, there was apparently in the wind some parents thinking there'd been a discussion of discontinuing this, which is the
Right.
Yeah, that was
opposite
aggressive.
of the
Yes, it
universe.
was actually
That
opposite,
was-
yeah.
Yes,
We
okay.
did share analytics, but it was for the opposite reason. And again, with board briefs, you can see that as well, that we are getting a strong open rate, as high as 79%, and that is sending it to all families. And we think we're doing good if we get over 50% on newsletters, because then we are hoping one person in the family is reading it, because we're getting both parent emails.
I had heard anecdotally, Terry, that a significant portion of the views for the feed also included like faculty and staff, which I was thrilled about, but I don't know
Yes.
if there's any way to really quantify that.
On the streaming?
Yeah.
No.
We don't get like source data. on
No,
where get
no,
the
they
thing
won't,
from or
no.
anything. Okay.
Until if we get bigger
Mhm.
and there's more followers, then you get, the more subscribers you have, the more YouTube gives you. Like if you have 500 subscribers, then you get a little more data, but until then, probably not.
Interesting. So is there merit to encouraging people to not just watch here and there, but to subscribe?
There is.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know what see, I'm knee deep in this for my husband's business right now, so I don't know what email provider you use, but I know that with HubSpot, if you're sending links via email to people and they're in your contact file, you can drill down and see who.
Oh,
where the
definitely in the
sources are.
email, I can look at all of that.
But it
It's
won't
just
tell
not
you
on
if you go
YouTube.
straight to the website. That
Right.
information's not
YouTube
available.
doesn't tell me who those viewers are, only how many we have. But I can see from our constant contact who clicked on the video. All right, so that concludes my report.
Okay. Any questions on the communications report? If not, move on to the ad hoc committees, first being EDC. I think Larry went, right? You were in the
Yeah,
minutes.
I mean, there's nothing earth-shattering to report.
Okay, and SAFE, Maren Chetler?
Nothing earth-shattering to report.
Mm-hmm.
No. Nothing beyond the report.
The written minutes.
Mhm.
Okay. In new business, the only thing maybe worth tapping is just the Pace Bus 422 issue that came up because so many parents, and I think at least 4 of the board members in their individual capacities were involved in commenting on that, but it was nice to see sort of parent and community interest, and in particular the effect on the special ed population. So something to keep an eye on. I know that they've got an upcoming board meeting, and D28 families may continue to be interested in that. In fact, that's a public meeting. We can probably put that like in the virtual backpack, something like that to share with people. Anything else in the new business bucket?
No.
Okay, if not, then the only 2 items remaining on the agenda are closed session and adjournment. In light of that fact, we're going to wrap up the recording so that Ramsden can be thanked and headed home. Thanks as well to the parents who stuck it out to the bitter end to be with us. And I need at this time a motion to go into closed session.